Welcome to the January 28th City of Boulder City Council study session. We've got 3 items on our agenda tonight, and the first one is the Hill Hotel, and then we will have e-scooters conversation, and the third item will be regarding B-Cycle. So take it away, staff.
Good evening, Council. Yvette Bowden, I'm the Director of Community Vitality. Tonight we're going to be going through an overview. I just want to set some context. So for the benefit of everybody in the audience and watching, as well as newer council members, we just want to remind everybody that the project site that we'll be talking about tonight is proposed at the northern end of the Hill commercial area along Broadway between University and Pleasant. The project is owned by 3 private entities, all of who plan to ground lease their properties into this one project proposed as a Hill Hotel. In addition, the council's role here is as the UGID board, specifically as it relates to a UGID-owned property on the site, which is the Pleasant Street parking lot. So by way of overview, we're going to be introducing you a couple of members of the team who are here this evening. We'll talk about the project intent, and we'll show a little video just as a recap. We'll review the information provided since the last council presentation, and then, of course, offer questions. Staff on this project has evolved over time, but has always had great representation from David Gear from the City Attorney's Office, members of the Community Vitality Department and Finance Department. Joel Wagner is here this evening. We have also got representation in the room from the Nichols Partnership. Don't know that we have somebody here from Sage Hospitality this evening, but they are part of the project team. And of course, Shears Atkins, Rockmore Architects. So rather than listening to me talk for 10 minutes about this project, we thought it was an interesting opportunity to use a local talent to tell the story of the Hill.
The Hill commercial area was established as a residential district shortly after He was founded at the end of the 19th century. Gradually, shops and restaurants were added to the ground floor of the houses, and today the district remains largely the same, roughly 1/10 the size of downtown Boulder. Over time, the Hill became a destination for music, dancing, and entertainment. Its vibrancy attracted customers from throughout the region. This tradition continues today with the presence of the Fox Theater, the Albums on the Hill record store, and the Innisfree Poetry bookstore and cafe. But change is inevitable, and shifting consumer behaviors contributed to the Hill becoming a destination mostly for students. In other areas of the city, reinvestment efforts reimagined storefronts and streetscapes to meet customers' evolving needs. Plans were drafted to reposition the Hill, but the district's small size and limited funding have always presented a barrier to revitalization. By 2014, 1/3 of Hill businesses had transitioned to fast food. The district had more barber, tattoo, and head shops than retail stores. That year, the City Council made it a priority to revitalize the Hill. Council commissioned a study that identified key next steps. First, address the perception of insufficient parking. Second, update and beautify its most rundown areas. And third, leverage 5 underutilized catalyst sites to attract uses that bring customers to the district when the students are away. In 2015, the city was approached by a team from Denver with an idea for achieving all 3 next steps. The team had agreements with owners of 3 properties located next to a public parking lot at the north end of the Hill. The Pleasant Street lot is owned by the University Hill General Improvement District, and the Boulder City Council is its board of directors. The team wanted to know if the city would like to partner to build a public parking garage beneath all 4 properties. Above the garage would be a hotel with ground floor retail. All property owners would retain ownership. Aging properties would be improved, the number of parking spaces on site would quadruple, and the hotel would bring much needed year-round customers to the Hill. In 2016, the City Council formally authorized staff to explore the idea further. Since then, efforts of the hotel team and the city have focused on the needs of existing retailers, matching the project design to neighborhood scale, limiting or eliminating city investment, and, most importantly, ensuring that the project will successfully contribute to Hill revitalization. The city conducted outreach to tenants in English, Nepalese, Spanish, and Vietnamese to ensure they were aware of the proposal and to determine their location needs if the project moves forward. There have been 3 public presentations of the evolving proposal and 6 updates to City Council. At Council's request, studies looked at current use of the Pleasant Street parking lot, the project's likely impacts on district parking supply, and whether a hotel would have a positive impact on district vitality. Most significantly, the outreach has resulted in the elimination of the public parking garage, and the city participation has been reduced to selling the Pleasant Street lot at market value. The hotel team agreed to support the relocation of existing tenants, a transportation demand management of Boulder website.
Thank you for your attention, Council. A larger printout of this video is provided, as well as a QR code should people want to access it later. At this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to one of the project managers, Sarah Weavenson from Community Vitality, who will walk us through additional information provided in your packet.
Great, thanks, Yvette. So we thought we would start off with reviewing the studies that were mentioned in the video. These have all been provided to Council over the last year in 2 batches in April of 2019 and August of 2019, and we'll also review the commitments to date from the development team. The first request for additional analysis that was provided in April looked at whether the 20,000 square foot UGID parking lot might be an appropriate location to develop affordable housing as an alternative use. Staff provided a preliminary assessment of the site's affordable housing potential under 3 scenarios. First, as an inclusionary project on the site with a combination of market rate and affordable units. Second, through a cash in lieu contribution toward affordable housing units constructed elsewhere. And finally, through a 100% low-income housing tax credit project on the site. These scenarios yielded anywhere from 7 to 40 affordable units. The high land value, high probability of needing underground parking, and the relatively low number of units rendered the site cost prohibitive in staff's opinion. For the same level of investment, staff estimated that the city could construct approximately 70 affordable units elsewhere in the city. The analysis also looked at the affordable housing benefit of developing the site as a hotel, estimating that the city's commercial linkage fee requirement would provide a one-time contribution of $1 million. Staff estimated that this amount could support the construction of 11 new affordable units elsewhere or the acquisition and renovation of 12 existing units. Also in April 2019, staff responded to a request for a bulk and mass comparison of the proposed hotel with existing hotels in Boulder. The comparison included the Hotel Boulderado, the St. Julian, and the recently completed Embassy Suites Hotel on Canyon. Following receipt of the 2 studies, Council indicated through a nod of 5 that staff should proceed with negotiating a letter of intent to sell the Pleasant Street lot to the Hill Hotel Partners, but requesting also that staff prepare 2 additional assessments. The first assessment looked at the impact of eliminating the public parking spaces on Pleasant Street on the total parking supply and demand in UGID. The consultant examined impacts both during the construction of the hotel and after completion of the project. Their assessment found that UGID spaces would be at peak utilization midday during construction, which is measured at 85% occupancy, as shown in yellow on the diagram at right, and that once the hotel was constructed, the additional demand could be met by the 50-space garage that's intended to be constructed as part of the hotel. The consultant also recommended that the city look at ways to meet evening demand when neighboring residents currently park in the Pleasant Street lot for free. They also recommended that the city explore opportunities to relocate the current Pleasant Street lot employee permit holders. Staff members are actively coordinating with CU to identify ways to do this, either through existing University Hill parking agreements or through the CU Conference Center garage that's intended to be constructed across Broadway from the proposed hotel. The second assessment requested by Council with the nod of 5 was a study of whether the hotel could achieve the catalytic economic impacts sought in the Hill reinvestment strategy. As mentioned in the video, the Hill continues to experience high vacancy rates with long-standing businesses such as those shown at right, vacating their spaces in recent months. A study related to the citywide retail project found that average revenues on the Hill are insufficient to offset Boulder's higher than average occupancy costs. The economic consultant measured the impact of a hotel compared to 3 alternatives: office commercial use, affordable housing, and maintaining the status quo. Their assessment found that a hotel use would have the highest positive impact on the vitality of the adjacent commercial area, bringing in $9.9 million in visitors' expenditures on retail goods and eating and drinking activities, of which a portion would likely be spent at surrounding Hill businesses. A hotel use, the consultant found, would have the highest fiscal impact to the city, including $5.4 million in one-time taxes, fees, and land sale proceeds, and an additional $1.6 million annually in sales and accommodations tax revenues. A hotel use would have the second highest impact on the broader Boulder economy compared to an office and commercial development, measured both in terms of job creations and overall economic output. Staff will continue to update Council on the commitments agreed to by the developer. To date, these include purchasing UJID's Pleasant Street lot for fair market value, contributing $200,000 to a tenant relocation assistance fund to be administered by the city, providing a transportation demand management program to reduce single occupancy vehicle access to the hotel by its employees, guests, and visitors, and hotel employment opportunities for CU students. More recently, the development team has also committed to designing the project so that it reflects its immediate context, including the Hill commercial area and CU campus. This week, the development team submitted an application for a public concept plan review with the Planning Board. Their review will look at the project's site plan, the general building design, and site access. Following the Planning Board review, Council at its discretion may call up the concept plan for additional public input. If Council is comfortable with the direction of the project, it may also wish to schedule a public hearing on the sale of the UJID parcel. It is possible to make the closing of the sale subject to final site plan review approval, which gives the city greater assurance that what is approved to be built on the site meets the intent of the land sale. The concept plan submittal includes materials that give the public a sense of the project's massing. This rendering shows the project as viewed from the north end of the site on Broadway at University Avenue. And here it is as viewed from the south on Broadway at Pleasant Street. Prior to tonight's meeting, there have been 3 community presentations on the concept for the hotel as the project has evolved, and there have also been 6 updates to Council. Staff has provided periodic updates to the impacted businesses, both those located on the project site and those located in the core of the Hill commercial area. All impacted tenants received a mailed letter prior to this meeting and an offer to meet with staff individually with interpreters as requested. As shown on the screen, the city also maintains a project website with records of past meetings, updates on the current project concept, and opportunities for public input. 2 city staff members are also available, myself and Joel Wagner with Finance, for any questions about the project as it relates to the Hill reinvestment strategy goals and to the potential fiscal impact of the project. Staff's questions for Council tonight include 2 questions. First, does Council have questions concerning the intent, evolution, and current scope of the Hill Hotel project, including the revised role of the city with regard to the project's potential financing and next steps? And a second question, does Council, as UJID's Board of Directors, support advancing the Hill Hotel project for Planning Board consideration, requiring, if ultimately approved, the sale of the UJID-owned Pleasant Street parking lot? And I can keep the questions up if that's helpful.
That'd be great. Thank you, Sarah. Do we have questions from Council? Mark?
2 questions. I assume the slide where you're showing view from the north is simply indicative of the massing, not the actual architecture. Okay. I am greatly relieved. And in terms of the sale of the parking lot, are we getting one appraisal or more than one appraisal? Okay, thank you.
Sarah, your microphone's off, and I don't think we're catching you.
Would you like me to repeat the answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So first, the images shown in the presentation are just for massing purposes at this point. and the architectural style would be determined through the concept review process with the planning board and with the city council if you desire to call that up. And to answer your second question, the appraisals for the fair market value of the property would be determined as mutually agreed upon in the letter of intent.
Bob?
Sorry, maybe you said this, but I want to just confirm that I heard it. The hotel, as contemplated at least, cannot be built without the purchase of the city's parking lot. Is that correct?
That's what the development team has indicated to us,
Okay.
that the assemblage is needed. It's
So-
1/3 of the site.
About 1/3 of the site. Great, thank you.
Aaron?
Thanks for that presentation. So could we request as part of the planning review process that the project be sent to the Design Advisory Board? Is that within our purview to request that?
As council might direct, we can pass that along.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
For those of us who haven't served on the planning board, Aaron, when would that come in vis-a-vis the planning board's review of concept?
Well, I think it's varied actually in the past, but I think the idea would be it would come certainly before site review. So I think probably in between concept and site review.
We can look into that with the Planning and Development Services and find out where is the appropriate.
Yeah, because I think like sometimes in the past, planning board at a site review has requested a round with the design advisory board, and that's maybe been a little less productive. Ideally, it happens before the site review so that the concept isn't 100% baked before the.
And presumably, and David, you can answer this too. Presumably, that would be. I'm assuming the council might call up the concept review, and so I guess the question is where that fits in vis-a-vis the council call up.
Well, it's done a variety of ways for a variety of projects, and I'm guessing on something like this that it would probably have multiple trips to the Design Advisory Board, both, early, middle, and then ultimately feeding into the site review process.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. I have a question for David or Tom, which is what are the limitations on the conditions that council can place on the sale of the site?
Well, it's a negotiation, so it has to be something that would be within the realm of a willing buyer and a willing seller. So there is some room there, and I think that, as Sarah pointed out earlier in her presentation, there is already a set of conditions in there. The ultimate issue for council is, do you ultimately believe that that's a good deal for the general improvement district?
So, for example, one of the things that will be necessary for the developer to pay is to pay the fees for the impacts on affordable housing, as per the menu of uses. And so, can council, as a condition of the sale of the land, require more affordable housing or more funds?
Well, I think that ultimately that goes to the value of the property. I think that, there's a pro forma that will go with that the developer has, and I really have no idea how affordable additional resources towards affordable housing would affect their pro forma. But in terms of our affordable housing impact fee, et cetera, they would be required to pay those as part of the project.
And also with respect to, I know that the project will go through a TDM plan, but can council put some requirements on the TDM plan? For example, on the impacts it would have to the employees of the hotel, and say, for instance, a lot of them will probably be minimum wage or thereabouts employees, and with respect to the expense of transportation.
Sure. So we would appreciate any feedback that you have on that. At this point, the conversations that we've had about the TDM plan they're pretty conceptual at this point. But yeah, any input that the council would like to give us in terms of how we would go forward and negotiate a purchase contract. If we go that next step, we would appreciate that.
So my only caution, Mary, is that David, correct me if I'm wrong, the parking lot's owned by UGID, and you're selling it in your role as the UGID Board of Directors, and the money goes to UGID. You'd have to be careful about putting conditions on the sale that don't benefit the owner. So, I mean, I think suggestions about TDM, suggestions about affordable housing are helpful, but to the extent that you're lowering the price that would go to UGID and putting into another city purpose, you might have a conflict of interest that I'd be careful about.
So,
Dave, I'm sorry, do you agree before?
Yeah, no, I do agree, but in terms of transportation demand management, that's within the wheelhouse of the powers that are granted in UGID's organic documents. So that would, playing in that sandbox would be fine.
so the request would need to be limited to affecting just the employees of the hotel or of the district and
Of the district. And yeah, so when you will be acting on the sale, you'll be acting as a fiduciary. You know, you're going to be wearing two hats, and we'll probably be reminding you of when you're wearing which hat. But on the one hand, you know, it's the traditional regulatory role that the council has in site review, and on the other hand, it's going to be as the board of directors for the general improvement district. And the general improvement district, as you guys are all aware, you know, it has a defined set of boundaries and a defined set of taxpayers that support it. The UGID taxpayers bought the parking lots that are, you know, in its portfolio now. So you would just have to kind of keep an eye on which hat you're wearing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Adam? And then Sam? Or Mark and Bob? Adam, Sam, Mark, and Bob? No?
Okay, I've heard this as a statement, but I just wanted to see if staff had verified it. The main building in the large L shape, I've heard that is nearing its useful end of life and would need to be renovated or deconstructed and rebuilt in a different way altogether. So I just want to see if that was accurate information.
That's our understanding from the property owners, and certainly when you do go to visit the building, there's some maintenance that they've been working on, but we hear that from the tenants of the building as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mark and Bob, and then Junie.
This is for council. Am I correct that this is going to be a combination of ground lease properties and fee ownership properties by the developer? Is that correct, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, that's my understanding of how they're going to structure it.
Does that raise any issues or concerns on the city's part that you're going to have, in effect, several ground lessors and the city all having interest in what goes on there?
Well, the city will be out of the deal, or not the city, the general improvement district. I got to be aware of the hats as well. But as it's presently structured, the sale of the UGID lot would go into the land assembly that the development team's putting together.
So it's simply a problem for the developer?
Yep, that's correct.
Bob, and then Junie?
I just want to play back what I think the chronology is, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So if we don't put on the brakes tonight, the concept plan will go forward, which sounds like it was just recently filed, will go forward. Maybe the design review board will be involved. Certainly the planning board will be involved. The developer will receive that input. I'm assuming the council will probably call this up, so that'll come to us in kind of the, call it maybe April, May timeframe-ish. And at that point in time, we'll weigh in on the concept plan. And is that the time you would ask us to approve the sale, subject to some conditions, which I'll get to in a second? Is that the point in time, more or less, when we're doing the concept review, you're also going to be asking us to approve the sale? Is that right?
That's our understanding, is that at that point, we've heard interest in having a public hearing on the sale.
Sure.
At that point.
That would be a swell idea. So public hearing, concept review, and approval of the sale. And then that's where I was going. But the sale would be conditioned on ultimate site review, because we're not going to want to sell, and they're probably not going to want to buy unless we all know that the thing that we think is going to get built there is going to get built there, right? And so the closing of the sale, we have a contract, but the closing of that sale where we're selling to the developer and the developer's giving us money won't happen until after site review is done. And we all know that this is going to happen the way folks are contemplating. Did I get the chronology right?
Yeah, that's presently our understanding in terms of how we would proceed through with the transaction.
Okay. So you're not necessarily asking us to approve the sale tonight, but if we had a lot of heartburn with it, you'd like to know that now before people go through a lot more cycles. But the approval of the sale won't happen until maybe the spring timeframe when we're looking at the concept review. Is that right?
Subject to all those.
Subject to those conditions. Okay, great. Thanks.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
So, and just to clarify, though, if we do call it up for the concept plan, that hearing for that would be around the same time as the hearing about selling the land, but those would be two separate hearings, right? Because in the one case would be the city council considering a development proposal. In the other case would be the UGID board considering selling the land, but they'd be near to each other time-wise. Is that fair?
Ideally.
Yeah,
it'd be the
ideally,
same,
yeah,
time.
yeah, but I could see them also,
That's,
they could be sequential, or they could
Do 'em on
probably
the same
be,
night, maybe.
or you could do them the same night. And I think one of the things also to remember, as part of concept review, there's no regulatory approval that comes out of concept review. It's really a public input process. And so, the process is set up so that you can, in fact, talk about things other than the regulatory requirements that are going to apply to the development. So this might work well with that.
Okay, good, thanks.
Junie? Okay. Sam?
This is just, I'm going to ask this question, it's a bit rhetorical, but because this will be the first concept plan with this council, when we do site plan reviews, it's quasi-judicial. When we do concept plan review, tell us what the rules are for like what we can comment on and how we do that.
You can comment on anything in a concept review, and you can go beyond the regulatory requirements that will be considered in site review. So if you wanted to talk about the tax implications or things outside of normal site review, that's fine. It's just knowing that not everything you say, if it isn't anticipated in a regulatory structure, will necessarily get implemented. But I do think that in terms of talking about the contract in the context of the concept review, I think that could work well.
Okay. And then council members have different opinions about how they choose to work with developers and to discuss with them. But for concept plan, there's no ex parte communication, disclosure, or anything like we have when we get to site plan review. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I would still recommend that council kind of use their normal kind of quasi-judicial hearing standards and be prepared. I just think in terms of transparency, it's great if you can keep track of those types of things and disclose them so that everybody comes to the table with the same set of information.
Great. Just trying to make sure that we all understand kind of the difference between site plan review and concept.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Sam. Any other questions? All right, so do we want to answer the questions for council here? Are we ready to do that? Sam?
So I have some comments I wanted to make before we got to answering the questions. I have shared these comments with the development team, but I want to bring it forward for the public and council to hear. There's two main concerns that I have with this around the Hill Hotel design itself. One is, and it's mentioned in the presentation, I just want to call it out, that we have a few contexts that we're operating in. One of the contexts is the building character of the Hill. There's some nice older buildings that have nice roofline treatments and window treatments and so on. And I think it would be very useful if this Hill Hotel was able to make reference to the history of the Hill, particularly the buildings that were built, between the turn of the century and the 1930s, because they have some character to them that's a little different than what we see in many other parts of the city. And the second thing is, I remain concerned about approaching this development project from the north to the south, coming up the hill. The tallest part of the structure, the bulkiest look, if we look at the presentation and were to look at the view from the north side, that is going to be somewhat imposing. And so that will be my concern at concept plan, and it will carry through to site plan review, which is how does the public experience the building as you approach it from the north side? So contrary to that, when you look from the south, the Pleasant, that looks really, in context, whereas I think the view from the north side looks bulkier, more massive, and so on in what we've seen so far. And so I just put out there that those are going to be some points of concern that I will carry forward into concept plan. I just wanted to get them out on the table right now. It doesn't affect that I think this should go forward. It's just more design than it is about the project itself.
And I would agree with those statements. Adam, and then Aaron.
Yeah, this is a similar type of concern. I don't have any idea about planning timelines right now, but all the new building codes and energy codes we adopted just in the last meeting, I don't think this project would probably fit under the deadline that those would start going into effect.
No, they would. Those codes would apply to this project.
Okay,
I
just
don't
want
see how
to
it could get to the building.
doubly verify because I think that's really important. And I'll hold off for the rest.
Aaron?
I wasn't planning to hold off. Can I jump into the question, or do other people have?
I just wanted to make some comments before, similar to the kind that Sam made before we jump into the question. So I understand that the hotel model will have the highest contribution to the economic vitality of the Hill, but it likely also has the highest externalities. And so I was interested in having the TDM plan address some of those externalities with respect to the people that are going to be coming into work. Now, I understand that there will be eco-passes that will be explored. But as we know with downtown, a lot of those jobs will be shift jobs, evening jobs, so there likely won't be the public transit. And likely, as with a lot of other minimum wage jobs, the people do not live in Boulder. So I would like the TDM plan to consider those externalities and make sure that the jobs that, the people that take the jobs that are result of this development are not vulnerable to just the commuting that they're going to have to do, and just make sure that that's addressed. Yes, please.
Yeah. That's a great point, Mary. I just wanted to maybe pile on a little bit, or maybe add a contribution to that. I know that there's discussions going on now between, I guess, us, or maybe it's the developer on the west side of the street, and the university, which is building a very large parking garage on the east side of the street, and about accommodating those employees of the hotel on the west side, so they could park across the street in the new university. And so we have this really great program that we launched here a few weeks ago, the three for
3 to 3.
All the threes, the $3 after 3 o'clock. Right. And I think that the types of employees that Mary is referring to, a lot of them would benefit from a program where they, if they're shift workers or working the evening or working in the hotel's restaurant or whatever it is, if they could come in and park at a discounted flat fee all evening long, have the safety and security of only having to go across the street as opposed to wandering through the hill, late at night. That would be swell. I know we don't have a control over that, but to the extent that you're negotiating, or somebody's negotiating with the university for parking for employees of the hotel, it would be great if we could have that discounted flat fee, secure type of parking arrangement.
Thanks for bringing that up, both of you. And thank you for acknowledging the work that we're doing in community vitality. In terms of the parking negotiation, I think we will certainly continue our conversations with the university as well as their partners to see how that can evolve. as you might imagine, as much as we need different kinds of modes, our work with transportation has us considering all of these evolutions. The construction time frame right now of all of these projects is our primary thought to make sure they have minimal disruption in the neighborhood and for existing businesses, but we will certainly make this a very high priority in the negotiations, and we'll be thoughtful around that. Thank you.
And yeah, thanks for bringing the 3 from 3 to 3 up. It's an excellent program. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the possibility of providing emergency housing for people that might get stuck due to weather events, things like that. If a giant snowstorm comes, for example, and people can't drive home or otherwise get home, that the hotel will provide housing for them, rooms.
We can certainly ask them about that.
Well, I would like it, if possible, to be a condition of the sale or the TDM. Sam?
Yeah, just following up on on this thought, we may need to start with negotiating the kind of 333 program with the university at first, but with the proceeds of the sale of the Pleasant Street lot, there's also the possibility of expanding the 14th Street lot, and then that would be within UGID's control to be able to implement a 333 program. So that wouldn't happen right away, but it's something that we can keep in mind going forward, that we might be able, if we expand that lot, to offer that to the people who work at the hotel and other employees on the Hill.
Thanks, Sam. All right, any other comments before we go to answering the question? All right, who wants to kick that off? Aaron?
Does anybody else wants to go first? Well, just before I go into that, I'll just say, Mary, thanks for bringing up those issues around the TDM for the employees. So I think particularly around the commuting patterns, I think, and parking, that's a really important point. The room idea is an interesting one as well. It's worth exploring. But anyway, I'll just say that I absolutely do feel like we should move forward on this. You know, as somebody who's been on council for 4 years, we've been considering this variations of this concept for years now, and I felt like the approach has gotten better at every step, and so I feel like we have the opportunity before us to move forward on a catalytic project that will also have huge synergies with the conference center that the university will be building across the street in a way that will really help the Hill district, and then have that tight connection to downtown as well. So I'm excited to move forward. I look forward to the next steps with the concept plan coming to us, but I'd like to see us proceed.
I am likewise supportive. You know, we've been promising the Hill for decades, I think, that we would do something to help revitalize the Hill, and finally we have an opportunity in front of us. As a matter of fact, it's the only opportunity in front of us. We have explored over the last couple of years alternatives, but none of them seem to make a whole lot of sense, and they're all hypothetical in any event. This is a project that's in front of us. It is catalytic. We all received a letter from the university today. We all might remember that back around 2015 or 2016, we strongly urged the university to build its conference center on the Hill and not over on Folsom Street. And they observed back to us today that given the size of the conference center, there won't be enough rooms, hotel rooms on their side of the street to accommodate all of the conference attendees that they anticipate. And so this hotel is synergistic with the conference center, which is what we insisted on. And so I think it would be probably inconsistent for us not to support a hotel that in turn supports the conference center, which we very much wanted there on the Hill. So I think this is a great project. I really want to compliment staff. I know this has been years in the making. I know we're not making any final decisions tonight, but I think this is a stepping stone to ultimate decisions. I think Murray and others have raised some really great points about some guardrails we can place on this. If this is what this is meant to be, we do want to be very thoughtful about this. It is our property. We have a right to sell it or not sell it. This is a pretty significantly underused parking lot, and you guys have done some great studies about this lot. And so it's probably an underperforming asset in any event. And if we can get a fair price for it and contribute to the revitalization of the hill, I think we should do it.
Sam?
I'm going to pile on a little bit. I do think this is an important project. It's a good project. It fulfills a commitment that we made to the university. I also believe that it will be very complementary to the conference center. I'm actually quite eager to have this conference center come in because I think we will have a lot of very interesting technical conferences that highlight the work going on at the labs here, the work going on at the university. I mean, there's just a lot to be able to have these kind of technical conferences, and right now they're held outside of town. You know, we can't do the convening that we'll be able to do with this conference center. So I think it's a really important amenity culturally and scientifically for the community that we have at the university. And having hotel rooms that are close by meets a lot of our climate goals because people will be able to use public transit should they choose to get to that hotel and then walk across the street to the conference center. I believe that the combined both hotels still won't hold the number of attendees that could be held if a conference is full, and so there will still be spillover that's going to go into the downtown and elsewhere. But I believe that this is a great way to have many of those attendees not have to have either traffic networks like Lyft and Uber or, a rental car. And so I think that it serves that end as well. Plus, of course, the revitalization work that we have thought about on the Hill. I mean, it will help mix and blend populations on the Hill, and it will provide support for different kinds of retail within the hotel itself, as well as different kinds of food service rather than just fast food on the Hill. It will help promote and support some of the other types of restaurants up there. So I am supportive of this project going forward. We need to do our fiduciary responsibility, make sure we get a fair market value price for that surface lot. I don't think it's particularly great use for that space in the city as a surface lot, and if we can replace it across the street as far as parking for employees or in the 14th Street lot eventually, I think those are things that we can look to do with that money. UGID is underfunded compared to KGID, and so having this infusion into UGID will at least allow us to have conversations about what our options are on the Hill. So in general, I think this is a really good project. We need to get it right. You know, I think massing and design elements are going to be really critical because if it's going to be a catalyst project, it's going to need to be something that highlights the entire Hill area, including the conference center across the street and however the university is going to do their architecture. So my understanding is some of the people involved with the design of the Hill Hotel are also part of design review of the conference center. So there should be connectivity there as far as an understanding of the themes that are going to be present both in the Hill and in the conference center. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the design evolves as we go through concept plan. I think it's really important for council to call up concept plan on a project that's this visible. And so I look forward to hearing what planning board has to say and us looking at it as well. But generally speaking, I think it's important that we move forward with this as best we can.
All right. Would anybody, Rachel?
I'll be brief. I agree and also support, and just want to say that I think that it has been a long road for community members and small business owners on the Hill, and so I want to thank people for their patience, and I'm happy that this council is probably instilling some hope tonight by moving forward. So I'm honored, assuming that we have the majority here, to be moving forward with that.
Mark, and then Adam.
I hope I am incorrect, but I tend to be a little bit of a skeptic as to the extent to which this will actually revitalize the rest of the Hill. But having said that, I think the project stands on its own merits. The Hill requires some plan of action. There is no plan B. I agree with Bob and Sam about its synergistic effect with the conference center. And I don't believe it would be appropriate for us to turn to the Uni Hill community and say, see you next year. We're just not going to move forward on this. I think this project has its own merits, and I support it.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, Adam.
It's okay. I don't know if you remember, but I actually came and testified against this several times when it first came up, but over time, as I've seen the plan and the involvement, and gone and spent time on the Hill, and became more aware of the actual situation, and seen the back and forth, I can comfortably say that I'm becoming converted to the entire concept, and I think it's becoming a very, very good potential project. I'm still just very much looking forward to the design, because I think of most importance at this point is going to be that this is accessible and friendly and open to all members of Boulder, not just strictly serving as a hotel that accommodates travelers. So that's sort of what I think this space needs to be, so that it's a focal point for everybody. Those in Boulder, those on the Hill, those coming just to spend a little time in Boulder. So that's what I'm looking for out of design, and I hope we can reach something like that.
Thank you, Adam. So all these comments actually raised another question for me, which is the $200,000 for relocation of the current businesses. I'm wondering if that is still enough, and so if necessary, because it's been a few years since that number was developed, and I just wonder, things have changed in a couple years, so if that number is not enough, it should be adjusted. And so I'll weigh in as well. I share Mark's skepticism and also the optimism in there as well, that the project stands on its own, but I'm not sure that it will solve all the problems. So it's a wait and see, but it does certainly introduce more traffic to the Hill. I agree with the comments that have been made with respect to the design and the importance of the view shed as you're coming south from the north. And those are my main comments. I think, it is an important catalyst project, as has been said. And I think it will have important synergies with across the street, and I think they have to play off of each other. So, good work. Anybody else want to comment? Junie?
I agree with everything that's been said already. I don't want to add too much to it. So it's moving forward. I'm for it. I think it's an opportunity for the community up there for revitalization, but also we also have to look into the transportation system as well. How will that work? So those are the things that I'm interested in. Thank you.
Thanks, Junie. Oh, go ahead.
Just one last, if I can just make a request out of my question before, just to make sure that this does go to the Design Advisory Board in between concept plan and site review.
Bob.
If I could just respond to Junie, gondola.
The G word. Did we answer both questions?
I believe so, and we appreciate council's attention this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for all the
Good
hard
work.
work
Yeah,
on
thank you
this.
for all the hard
It's gotten
work.
better over time. Thank you.
All right, next item. We'll just give a little time for staff switch over.
Can I suggest that you mention why you're leaving the meeting and
I thought
talk
about
the
it,
whole program?
Yeah.
Because I think most people didn't catch that at the retreat.
Okay, yeah, thank you. While the staff is getting situated, I just wanted to explain why I'm running the meeting and not the mayor, Sam. At the retreat, we had a suggestion that we rotate leadership on the study sessions, and that rotation be tied to whoever is on rotation with the council agenda committee. And so that fell on me. I'm on rotation, and that's why I'm leading the study session, and not that Sam's still mayor. That's all that is to say, is that Sam is still mayor.
There was not a coup.
All right.
Just because he's mayor doesn't mean we have to wait for him, though.
Well, I think we can get started. We have a quorum, and we don't need it anyway for a study session. So our next topic is Boulder, actually the micromobility program. Is that going to go first, or are they kind of mixed together?
They're mixed together. B-Cycle will go first.
All right, then.
Right. So thanks for having us tonight. I'm Carlos Hernandez. I'm the new Director of Transportation and Mobility. And I'm going to do a quick opening, and then I'm going to pass it over to DK. So first, I wanted to thank everybody who's been involved with this. This is my 12th day on the job, and I really am getting an understanding of projects like this, how many departments were involved in this conversation. So community vitality, parks, police, city attorney's office, the communications group, and then external stakeholders like CU. Probably most importantly, the community has weighed in on this, and so this is a really comprehensive set of ideas that have been brought forth. There are some big wins that have happened since the packet has been issued, and one of them is around funding. I think this notion of trying to fund things collaboratively is a reflection of how hard this team's been working across lines. So I'm really excited about to show you that tonight. Chris Hagelin was supposed to be here, but he got sick this afternoon, and I told him to go home. So that was for you and for Chris, too. And so he's watching this tonight. Hi, Chris. And he's going to email if tough questions come up. DK's got most of them covered, but just in case. The idea is that we have two topics tonight, Boulder bike sharing, and then we have shared micromobility. And if I checked in right, we have 2 hours for this topic. Hopefully we get done sooner. But what we want to do is at least do Boulder, the bike sharing part first. DK's got about 10, 12 minutes worth of slides. I'd like to let him go through his show. He's been working really hard. He was sending emails on Sunday night on this, so I want to give him his 12 minutes to go through the show. And then we want to open it up for conversation. We'll have that part, and then hopefully we can get into the second part, which is largely about e-scooters, right? Last thing I'll say is tonight we have two members with us from Transportation Advisory Board. Mark and Alex are here. There was a great suggestion at the CAC meeting about having tab members here that were part of the conversation. And I want to make sure that you know that we're like, this is an evolving conversation. We had a great meeting before this. We have many to come. But I want to make sure that if there's an opportunity to let them speak tonight as well, we want to make sure that's incorporated with your permission. So that's it for the housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to DK in 30 seconds. I just wanted to also tell you that I had a really great week. This is my 12th day on the job, and it was awesome to be at the retreat. The energy and the conversations that you had were like so solidifying for me to be part of this. And then Jane said something the other morning. She said that she was gracious for the work that I'd been doing. It was really motivating. So I just want to thank you. It's been an awesome transition into this, and so regardless how this goes tonight, I'll still show up tomorrow. But it's been just an awesome first couple laps. So thanks.
That's all what you think now. You just wait until.
Hopefully, I didn't just jinx it. So, nevertheless, I'm going to turn it over to DK.
Thanks, Carlos, and it's been great to have you on board so far. Your energy has been wonderful. Thank you. My name is Dave Kemp. Go by DK. I'm a senior transportation planner, and let's get started. Oh, I should say good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks for having us. Boulder bike, oh, sorry. Let me see, make sure we got the right. Here we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is to share the results of our analysis and to get TAB's input specifically on two items. One is the overview of Boulder B-Cycle operations and review of the proposed 2020 funding plan. And the second item is to review staff's shared e-scooter micromobility ordinance recommendation. And just a quick note, we'll be discussing at the February 11th City Council study session where private and or shared lightweight electric and human-powered vehicles should be allowed to operate in the city. So that's coming up in a few weeks now.
And so in terms of B-Cycle and the current status, we're looking at 300 bikes, 45 stations. They are a valued community partner. They do a lot with Mobility for All, have an affordability program. They do help us out with a lot of our promotions, a library pass program, and currently they're funded by a couple different sources here, corporate sponsorships, city subsidy, and then also through several different pass programs. And while B-Cycle is an older system, it has proven itself to be very reliable, predictable, and safe. And B-Cycle is a nonprofit contracted by the city rather than a for-profit business. And so we've been able to really work closely with them and weigh in our direction and align our goals. Excuse me. This next set of slides will help you get a sense of current B-Cycle's trends. This particular slide is the rider categories per year. And you'll see that the green and gray boxes are likely driven by visitors and tourism. And the yellow boxes indicate CU-affiliated trips. And you can see how much this category has grown, especially in the last quarter of 2019. And the red and blue boxes indicate monthly and annual passes, which are largely comprised of community members riding through the city.
DK, if we had a question on this slide,
Sure.
do you want us to ask it now or do you want to come back to it? That'd be fine.
Okay, thanks. Okay. This is a interesting map. This is a heat map as requested by Mayor Young. This is only CU-affiliated trips, and so we use their email addresses to understand who's a member of this, but it really shows you the vibrant activity around the university and several shopping areas too. Folsom Street at Canyon, and then also along Arapahoe as well. And then also look at Baseline in Williams Village there, and so you can see there's quite a bit of activity taking place with CU students, which is great. And this is a quick snapshot. I know it's hard to read so far away, but it kind of gives you an idea of the activity at several of the different stations, actually all 45 stations. And with the top stations of note to include the Folsom and Colorado intersection, Williams Village, Pearl Place, Broadway and Euclid, and 21st and Arapahoe being the highest checkout stations. There's a correlating return map as well, or chart that also talks about where the bikes are coming back, but it's very similar to some degree of what the checkout looks like. So a lot of return trips and also one-way trips. And here is the monthly use by the years, 2017 through 2019. Now the bell curve before you is very emblematic of overall cycling activity in the city today, and is mostly due to winter precipitation and colder temps. But again, take a close look at late 2019 and then a lot of the new activity that's coming up in and around campus. And so here we are today. And like many other early bike share programs, Boulder Bike Share has been operating in a non-sustainable funding model. The current model is relying upon sponsorships for ongoing O&M. And in 2019, B-Cycle lost its presenting sponsor, which is why we're in the predicament that we're in today. And Transportation and Community Vitality stepped in late 2019 to prevent the system from shutting down, which could have been in late November of last year. And so the potential loss of B-Cycle then or in the near future would cause an extended gap in our bike share service. We don't want that. B-Cycle's reserve funds that they have today would have been used to notify users, issue refunds to members, and essentially close the system. They would cover the displays at the stations, and the bikes would have been needed to be stored, or the bikes and the stations would have likely been stored at the MSC yard, along with a plan for removing the stations and potentially liquidating the equipment that's in the field today. And so we've been hard at work with our partners, and staff proposes that the city, CU, and B-Cycle collaborate on developing a strategic operations plan for the next 3 to 5 years, which will be shared with TAB and Council and the community for input in Q3 of 2020. And let's talk about B-Cycle's current equipment. As I mentioned, it is an older system, it's aging, but it's still working. It is safe, reliable, and predictable. A future path forward with Boulder B-Cycle would be to gradually phase out some of the older bikes. Some of those bikes in the system right now are almost 10 years old, and they've been holding up, and they've done a great job of maintaining them. They've lasted a long time, but they're getting old. And so converting or phasing those old bikes out to new bikes, both human-powered and electric assist, is potentially one of our goals moving forward with the company. And so we look at some of the benefits of e-bikes. We're looking to get more types of people on bikes. They can go further on e-bikes. They're great for our terrain around here, hilly, getting up to Chautauqua Park or up into North Boulder. And some of the concerns of e-bikes is that, well, you can go at a sustained speed longer over a traditional human-powered bike, and they're more expensive from a capital upfront cost and then also maintaining the bike. And so this leads me to the last slide of this section here. And this gives you kind of a breakdown of the funding that we're proposing tonight. And we've, again, coordinated with all of our partners, internal and external, to cover the 2020 B-Cycle funding and deficit. So the question tonight for you is, should we proceed with B-Cycle and its partners to prepare a strategic plan for City Council to consider in Q3 of 2020?
So I'll just add one thing before we ask Tab, and then we can do the questions if that's okay. So I asked staff last week when we heard this if there's any way that we could ask our partners plus look internal to fund this without asking for a new funding request. And so what you see tonight is a lot of effort among staff and our partners to do that. So the $275,000 is the amount to add some electric B-cycles into the system. I think the number was 40 or so e-bikes into the B-cycle system. Is that right? Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so about 40 e-bikes in there, and to keep the system going. So we're doing some modernization, not just kind of keeping the baseline. So CU Boulder is up 40% in their contribution of what they historically have done. So that was a really great letter to receive and a partnership to receive. That left us with $165K to fund. The number at the bottom, if you go to the bottom right, is $50,000. That was a number we had previously budgeted, so that's not like new money we had to go find within internally. So all those numbers in the middle from that 33 to 42 is what we found internally. I want to thank Community Vitality. They reached out to their partners in the district and asked about this, and those partners said, yes, B-Cycle is key to us. I believe it was BJAD and then Downtown Boulder, DMC. And so they upped their contribution. So then that left us with the $15,000, $7,500, $17,000, and then $42,000. So, Bob, you rightfully so asked about this, and now we have answers for you tonight. So the $15,000 is coming from TDM programs, and that we have budgeted this year, but that we want to repurpose this money to save B-Cycle for. There's some bike planning money that was going to happen within a group. That's the $7,500. There's some community planning efforts that were going to happen. That's the $17,500. And then we don't have a Gold Boulder manager right now, so that salary is not being allocated right now. So we're able to use that money, since we don't have a Gold Boulder manager right now, to get to the ultimate number that you see at the top. So that's how we went into the couch cushions and got it funded so that we could keep going and moving ahead, right? So that's a funding breakdown. I want to make sure I'm allowing our tab members, and I believe, Alex, you wanted to talk about this tonight. So I'm going to get out of the chair, let you talk, and then we're going to go back to you, if that's okay. Oh, there's two more
yeah,
chairs
come on
too.
up here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That one's too warm anyway.
Evening, Council.
Evening. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Oh, of course. We're operating in an era of uncertainty, especially with...
Alex, can you introduce yourself first?
Alex Weinheimer, Transportation Advisory Board. Us on TAB, we face a lot of uncertainty with micromobility. We don't know if or when we're going to get dockless bikes, what the future of scooters are. For a decade now, Boulder Bike Share has been a good partner with the city. So as TAB tries to solve our first mile, last mile challenges throughout the city, Boulder Bike Share and B-Cycle is something that we know is working. I've seen their operation firsthand. They're pretty efficient. They're really good about relocating the stations around town. Some in Gun Barrel and North Boulder weren't working as well. They've moved them to CU. They're working. CU's come in as a funding partner, or increased their contribution as a funding partner. So there's a lot of things going well with the system, and they've been a reliable partner for a decade. I've ridden probably a dozen different systems across the country, and they're not nearly as reliable as far as bikes being at the station and the bikes being in good condition the way they are here. So TAB certainly supports the continued investment and partnership with Boulder Bike Share as we wade through the other challenges of e-bikes and scooters. And so the additional funding would also, I think, expose a lot of people to the benefits of e-bikes. 15,000 people last year used the B-cycle system. So in a city known for bicycling, it's a good way to give exposure to both residents and visitors, give them an opportunity to bike around the central part of our city. So yeah, anything else?
Just have a quick question for Mark and Alex. Does TAB feel that the bridge money is going to provide B-Cycle with enough time to be able to come up with a plan?
I believe so, and it also buys us time as we sort out the other modes. If scooters and dockless e-bikes were to come in for a couple of years and we were to get rid of B-Cycle, but then those private companies decide this market isn't viable for them, we're left with nothing. So I think it's certainly worth continuing for at least a year, see what, as far as an action plan to make a more sustainable model goes. And I think there's if we were to get the private companies in, the cost is really placed on the user in a way that B-Cycle isn't always. A lot of employers provide B-Cycle memberships, or the annual expense is only $88 a year. So for someone who uses it a lot, that's not a ton per trip. If you were to pay what some of these other companies charge per trip and you were a frequent user, the cost would be a lot more. So I think there's an equity component to it as well that I really like with the B-Cycle model.
Mark and then Adam?
Two questions. First.
Oh, and then Sam.
First, in the absence of a manager, how is the program going to be managed? And then I have a follow-up.
You do that one. Go ahead.
Sure. We actually do have an interim Go Boulder manager right now, Chris Haglin. And then, of course, I would serve as a project manager for that and working with Carlos and Chris and I and the rest of our team. I think that's what you mean about staff.
Is there a cost to that?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I get the question right, Mark. So there will be a manager of the Boulder B-Cycle system. Mm-hmm. The manager that's not on there is our internal group, Go Boulder manager. So they're two different heads. So there will be somebody actively managing B-Cycle.
And my second question is...
Can I follow up, Mark? Do you mind?
Yeah.
So get that, but are we essentially sacrificing a head count, somebody in the department, in order to do this?
So we have somebody acting right now, Chris Haglin.
Sure.
Because of Chris's current role and then the Go Boulder role, we're not paying a full salary because Chris has an existing salary as an FT in our current system. So the difference between those two is how we're going to fund this. So it's not a long-term solution. It's actually a situation right now that presented itself. We are going through a process to determine what that role is, how it looks like, how it fits in. And so say that we advertise that job in a month or two, we would, even if we did that, the savings that we got from not having it in maybe Q1 and maybe Q2 would cover this.
So in other words, you would still be anticipating filling that position, but so the reason why this isn't a full year's full-time salary is because it's not a whole year? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
My second question is, what portion of the $275,000 represents the acquisition of e-cycles?
Sure. So right now, again, we're looking at a 40-60 split with CU Boulder in the city, and about 185 is required for operations and maintenance in 2020. And so the rest of those funds from the 275 would be used for refinement of the current system, and then also looking at how we pilot e-bikes in the city. And the exact number still is to be determined about how many e-bikes those would be and if we would own them or if we would lease them. But the goal here is to get us started on the right foot, if you will, to begin experimenting with e-bikes and help begin to evolve the organization.
Thank you.
Adam?
Excuse my unfamiliarity with the system, but what type of data is collected, and is any of that shared and or sold?
Sure. So a lot of the slides that we looked at here constitutes a lot of the data.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
And it's all public and it's not sold.
Okay.
And we use it for planning purposes with the city and, of course, for them to refine their operations.
So if we ended up going with a private system, then we couldn't. That's almost a community benefit in itself, in that. None of their data is shared or sold when they have used this system.
And it depends on what kind of data we're talking about. There's a lot of valuable data that can come from the private sector to help us understand where people are riding bikes or scooters within the city, to help us understand preferred routes. That's valuable data, and we can add that in the regulations to be required as part of the contract with the city. What we don't have control over is some of the back-end stuff about why some of the companies are collecting your information about where you go, your consumer behavior. None of your private information is at stake, credit card information, but
metadata.
There is potential for that data to be sold. Yes.
Gotcha.
Sam?
You have a series of questions, mostly about the presentation. So if you want to go back to slide 4, which is the number of trips, I was trying to figure out what the numbers above the bars are, 836, 2261.
I'm sorry, Sam. That is the gray, the bar. That is the likely tourism, I believe. Let me just double check here. Yeah, the green and gray boxes, so they're very small slivers. So the numbers above those gray boxes indicate.
I see. Okay,
yes.
thank you. Yeah, that helps me understand that. And then on the next slide, I just wanted to double check. You said that the heat map is derived only from the student rides. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Through a special relationship with CU Boulder, they were able to use CU affiliated emails and create this particular heat map. So it is only showing CU activity at this point. It'd be great if we can advance and show a heat map that's representative of all trips, but this is what we got right now.
Got it. And I mean, I think the reason that that's really important is because the first impression of this map, this is Boulder B-Cycle heat map, is this is all rides. And so if we go to the next slide then, we can get some clue as to what isn't university affiliated by things like Pearl Place. So where's the Pearl Place station?
So I think that's at Pearl and Junction in that vicinity there.
Okay, and then we've got Boulder Junction. So I guess the takeaway here is it's not all students. It's just that we have a lot of student information, but that there are plenty of folks who are non-tourist and non-students who are using this in one way or another.
That's correct. And really the funding split emulates the ridership. So we're seeing about 40% of the rides generated by CU affiliated members, and then 60% coming from residents and visitors.
Okay, very good. And then I had another question. I mean, I have an e-bike that I've had for a while, and I haven't noticed any particular O&M, and I ride it a fair bit. I do a lot of my commuting by e-bike now. And, you know, I have to lube the chain, I have to replace the tubes every once in a while. But as far as things like the battery, you know, range reducing or anything, in 4 years I haven't seen that. So you talk about, I know there's an additional expense for e-bikes. They're a little more expensive, even though the price is coming down. But I was curious what the claim for increased O&M was about. What is that contemplating?
Right. So a lot of the shared e-bikes out there today do have a battery pack, and sometimes that battery can be removed from the bike and the bike can be left, but the battery needs to be recharged. And so it's about going out and servicing the battery to make sure that it's got juice in order for the next rider. That's a big part of it. And it's also about the redistribution or rebalancing of the bikes within the system. That can also affect the cost.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see you needing spares so that you're taking and swapping batteries whenever you move the bikes back and forth or whatever. But that seems like that's a fixed upfront cost, and then. At least my experience has been that the batteries, kind of like, when I first bought a Prius, I was told I'd have to replace the battery pack in the Prius at 5 years. And the truth is that, it's been 13 and nothing has really changed as far as mileage. So it's just a question. It doesn't seem to me that there should be a whole bunch of additional O&M, but maybe there is some as far as swapping the batteries.
I'm happy to follow up too and get you a more precise answer about all the specific costs, but that's the major ones that I know about today.
Okay. And other communities that have e-bike share, have they had any increase in accident rates or injuries between the e-bikes and the non-e-bikes?
Not that we've seen. All the data that we've analyzed, we haven't seen e-bikes as a factor in increased injury rates or conflicts with other users.
Great. And then, the last thing I would just ask, there's, I guess, type 1, type 2, and type 3 e-bikes, and those have to do with the governing of the speed. What do you, so like type 3 or 25 miles an hour, type 2, mine is 18 miles an hour, give or take, and then type 1 are like 12 to 15 miles an hour. So what would you contemplate for the type of e-bikes that you would use for B-Cycle?
Sure. Just to clarify the different classifications of e-bikes, a type 1 is essentially a pedal assist, and so you only get the juice when you pedal. Type 2, it involves a pedal assist and or a throttle. So it'll have a little button next to the handlebar grip, and that can be activated either way. And those two bikes are governed at about 20 miles per hour. And that's part of a federal definition of what constitutes an electric assist bicycle. And then class 3 e-bikes can be both pedal assist and throttle, but they have a higher speed of about 28 miles per hour.
28, okay.
Yep, and so it's about the wattage. And so class 1 and class 2 looks up at about 1 horsepower, and class 3 will go up further than that.
Great. And what would you contemplate for the type that you would think of for B-Cycle?
Class 1.
Class 1. So pedal assist, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in terms of being able to monitor the speed, that can be adjusted through geofencing. So personal bikes, no, they can't, but 20 miles an hour is the top speed. But if you say you wanted to have a shared e-bike system, you could regulate the speeds to be anywhere from 12 to 20 miles per hour.
And the speed limit on our paths is 15?
Correct.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Thanks. I'm sorry if this was tucked in and I just didn't see it, but looking at the colorful graph, I think Sam said slide 4 again.
Okay.
And CU member trips have gone up like almost double from 2017 to 2019. Is that because we moved stations, or what caused that?
That is correct. Yeah, we repurposed some of the stations that were low performing, and we put them in areas where we thought where B-Cycle thought that they would have higher performance or higher activity.
And then the non-CU member trips are down, but that's because they're not as readily available in Gun Barrel or other places where we moved them from. It's not like a loss in interest, would you say?
Well, actually, 2019 numbers are down a little bit because we think it's due to the weather. We had a particularly early rainy year, and so that will influence.
Except CUs went up by like
But
12,000.
CUs went up at the latter part of 2019, so not in the spring.
Aaron. Oh, wait a minute, Bob, and then Aaron.
So stay on the slide because I'm still trying to understand the 60-40 split. First of all, so let's start at the bottom. The blue is non-CU affiliated members, right? People that buy annual memberships that are not affiliated with CU. Is that right?
Well, it's possible that they could be.
There could be some CU in there.
There could be, yep. And so the yellow is strictly
CU.
CU email addresses.
So let's just say, for sake of discussion, that all 32,000 of those are not CU folks, and 46,000 are CU ones. Now the green is walk-up day passes, and the gray is pay-per trip passes. So those we kind of presume are either tourists Or I suppose they could be residents who just don't want to do a membership. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And then the red, the monthly members, who is that?
And so the red here, just let me look at my notes, a lot of boxes. The red, those are monthly and annual passes, and I think that the monthly passes are red.
So our monthly pass.
Is that correct? Monthly is red? Okay.
The monthly are also non-CU affiliated, or there could be some CU in there also?
There could be some CU in there as well.
So how do we get to 60% for us and 40% for CU? Help me with the math there. Are we putting all the tourists and all of the reds and all of the blue on our side of the equation? Is that how it is getting to? Even there, it still seems to me it's about 50-50, because it's like right at about 100,000 rides and 46,000 at a minimum we know are CU, so that's approaching half. How do we get to 40%?
If we could ask Kevin Krause, Executive Director, to come and speak to that number, that would be very helpful.
Kevin, please come up.
And Bob, while we're having him come up, by my math, it's about 43% are CU if we just count the CU yellow bar.
And if everything is on our side of the ledger, yeah, okay.
But interestingly enough, we received an email from somebody who's a CU employee who has a monthly membership. So
yeah,
what are the chances?
It's true. Mayor Rivers' math is exactly how we had done this, is that it's basically the total of trips is just over 106,000 for last year, minus the 46,000 CU trips and what remains.
So basically, this is a proposal that B-Cycle made, not necessarily a negotiation between us and CU.
We certainly provided all the information both to the city and to CU about who was riding the bikes. And to be honest, the CU offer was based on their percentage of rides.
Yeah, okay. And so how much negotiate was that? Like they said, we'll give you 40, we said sure? Or was there like some back and forth there?
I would say that they came, we weren't even sure that they were coming to the table. They offered $15,000 to the system last year, is that right? So when they came with the letter that said they're going to give 100 and, what is the number now? 10. We didn't start negotiating. We said, thanks, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
So we didn't begin negotiations, but we were really thankful that they went up from 15 to 100 and whatever it is.
Right. Because I understand the heat map is only CU affiliated ones, but then if I look at the station list, could you go to the station? A lot of those places on the left-hand side with a lot of the usage are right either on or very near campus. And so that would seem to bear out that, it may be approaching half or maybe even more than half CU student riders. My comment, I guess, following on these questions, this line of questioning is just, I'd be interested in a negotiation with CU about whether 40-60 is the right fair split there. I mean, from B-Cycle standpoint, you're just looking for the money. You don't care where it comes from, but we do. And if we have a lot of students using these stations, and a lot of minimum of 43%, but maybe more of CU affiliated folks that are the actual riders, then it seems to me it would be fair to have a discussion with CU about increasing that 40% contribution.
And they have made it clear that they will discuss future allocation of dollars based upon the numbers of riders. So if it does increase in future years, then they will increase their funding.
I have just a couple more questions on a slightly different line. I understood the extra, I don't know, call it $100,000 for the e-bikes, and that's intriguing. Who would own those e-bikes? Because we may fund this year, and then maybe things are still not looking so good, and we revisit this in 6 months or 9 months, and it's just not looking like there's a solution here. Or maybe there's a wonderful solution because some sponsor runs in and wants to give you $150,000. That'd be great. That'd be a great situation. But who, since we're spending about $100,000 on e-bikes, who owns those? Does B-Cycle own those? Does the university own them? Do we own them? Is it a 60-40 split? What happens if this kind of all doesn't go forward in a year or two? Like, whose bikes are those?
I think that is to be determined still, and will be part of our strategic planning process. It is difficult to say right now if those bikes will be owned by us or leased by us, and then if the money is split between the two different entities, then which bikes would go back to CU? But I think that. it's part of our plan to work out how that arrangement would take
TBD.
place.
And then
Yes.
final question, and then I'll stop for now, and I have a few more later. And this is for B-Cycle. B-Cycle is actually, I know that you're in the process, or maybe have closed your Denver operations. Is that right?
The way it works actually is that we're a separate nonprofit from Denver Bike Sharing, and so Boulder Bike Sharing, we have B-Cycle brand equipment, but ours is operating as long as we'll choose to operate it, and then Denver Bike Sharing is closing their B-Cycle system.
So there's kind of I know they're local nonprofits, but there's kind of a big corporate umbrella, right? There's a bunch of, it's nationwide, right?
Yeah, the B-Cycle LLC is a fully owned subsidiary of Trek in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So basically we buy their equipment and license their software.
So you're in a bunch of cities, is that right? Or they're in a bunch of cities.
They're in a bunch of cities, exactly. Their equipment is.
And so Denver's shutting down. Well, what's the experience of some of the other bike share systems across the country? Are they facing some of the same headwinds that we're seeing here in Boulder and Denver?
That's a great question. I'll talk this briefly as I can. So basically, dock-based bike sharing is still pretty live and well in the densest and largest cities. The cities that seem to be having some trouble, whether they're B-Cycle hardware or other hardware providers, tend to be smaller, mid-sized cities. Basically, it does cost more to buy and then to run a system like that, but the trade-off is the kind of predictability and reliability. So you have everything. You have a mix of huge city systems that are profitable, have for-profit operators that are either hired by the city or transit agencies who own the systems, and then you have a lot of the B-Cycle brand systems are owned and operated by a local nonprofit, and there's a mix across the board there too. Because really the wild thing is, a single or several larger sponsors totally change the game for us, and that can be really positive, and then when the bottom drops out, it's not.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron?
Yeah, so can you go back to the slide about usage per station, please? There we go. All right, so one of the things that I think sticks out from this graph is that there's some very small numbers over at the end. And we talked about the repurposing. Those ones with very low ridership, have they already been repurposed?
Want to speak to the repurposing decisions? Okay. Thank you for the question. Yeah, on this chart, it basically shows all of the trips by station in 2019, everything at the lowest end. Let's see, Broadway and Iris, Table Mesa, 30th and Diagonal, and actually going up, those were all removed during this year. So I guess it's not an apples to apples comparison in that they're at the very bottom, but we proposed ones for relocation that were either the very bottom or, a few steps up, but for some other reason weren't making sense.
Okay, good. So do you feel like you've kind of cut out the really underperforming stations? Or I guess part of what I'm getting at is, do you feel like there could be some additional efficiencies by cutting out other stations that really aren't performing?
I do. I think it comes to my mind to more repurpose them again.
Yeah.
Because really we've relocated stations to denser parts of the city, but then we also have situations where if there's a great pass program in place, we're more optimistic about how many people will ride.
I really meant relocate rather than get rid of.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that would be wise to do.
Okay, thank you. And I guess what is you're talking about putting together a plan. This gives time to put together the next phase of the plan, right? And I guess we'll get to, we're doing comments next. I'll wait.
Sam?
Yeah, I just have a question about the ownership again, because I believe I saw in the memo and maybe the presentation that if B-Cycle were to shut down, we, the city, would take over the docks and the bikes and put them out at the MMC. And so how would that be any different with the electric bikes?
It may not be. And that is the current situation, is that through our arrangement, through our partnership with the nonprofit Boulder Bike Share in the beginning, that through the contract that we would be the owners should the nonprofit have to close its doors. And so then our options would be to potentially find another service provider, do it in-house, or switch to a different type of system altogether and liquidate the current system.
I see. And so that's completely open for negotiation if we go forward with the $275,000, and part of that is for acquiring e-bikes. There would be an arrangement at least worked out that would determine where those bikes would end up should the system fail.
Correct.
Okay.
If we own them.
Okay. Right. And
if we bought them.
It certainly seems like that if we buy them or if we sign up for the lease or whatever, and the lease term is longer than maybe the nonprofit lasts, then we would still have maybe not ownership, but commitment on the lease for those. Okay, that's my only question.
May I just add to that? We're trying to get Boulder bike sharing off this, I guess, the reliance of sponsorship dollars, but it's not to say that we're going to forgo the sponsorship model. And actually, if it's possible, we can augment the system with additional dollars. And what's appealing to a lot of corporate sponsors is to do something new. And so getting behind something like new e-bikes could be a way in which we could also generate more sponsorship revenue, which would go back into the system, either refining it or operating and maintaining the current system or purchasing new equipment.
All right, I have some questions. Oh, Mark, did you want to respond to that?
I just wanted to,
microphone, please.
At some point, I just wanted to make a quick point. And I can
Please do.
Okay. DK, could you go to the funding slide?
And Mark, please introduce yourself. If you don't mind.
I'm Mark McIntyre, current tab member. The only thing I wanted to say here is that I just wanted to make sure that you as council understood that this has not come before tab. This is happening very quickly, and Alex and I heard about it tonight, or at least I heard about it tonight for my first time in a meeting, with Carlos. So, which is not to say I do support this. I support not having a catastrophic failure to the system, a precipitous failure. I prefer to buy the time here, but I think we need to be ready to evaluate completely different systems as we spend this money and keep the system going for a while. But I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that this was not something that has come before tab and has not been voted on.
Thank you, Mark. Bob?
So just following up, thanks for that, Mark. And that was a question I had, is whether TAB had weighed in, because I know this came up very, very quickly for us, and sounds like you guys haven't had a chance to meet, so we won't presume that TAB supports it other than the comments that you guys are making individually. But let me ask that question, and maybe this is something to take back to TAB. When do you guys next meet?
February 10th.
So is there a possibility, because there's really two halves here, right? There's the $185,000 to keep the program afloat, and then another, we'll call it $100,000 to go out and buy some e-bikes. And it doesn't feel to me like we've done a whole lot of analysis about the e-bikes and how successful they are in other cities, and TAB hasn't weighed in. Could it be possible that we could approve $185,000 tonight? But I'd like to send you back to see if we can negotiate a better split with CU. And punt on and that keeps the ship afloat, keeps the program going, and then really have TAB drill into whether it makes sense to spend another $100,000 on e-bikes. It sounds like we've got some questions about ownership, about how viable they'll be, what's the experience in other cities, and really value TAB's input, obviously holistically, but particularly on the e-bike system. That's not needed right now to keep the system afloat, right? That's something that can happen a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. Whenever TAB has an opinion about that, you can come back to us and share that. So I just want to throw that out as a possibility of breaking this into two different decisions.
So, go ahead. I'm going to hold. I'm going to let the conversation
I very much support what Bob has just said. It seems to me that going out and spending $100,000 on e-bikes, which from every report I've ever had are the greatest things since sliced bread, but in the absence of a funding model, we're kind of doubling down where we're being asked to increase our contribution by an order of 2.5 times, and we still don't know what the longer-term prospects are for this. I don't want to turn the lights off. I want us to be able to continue to have a viable bike sharing program, but I think stepping out in the absence of knowing where we're going to go and how we're going to do it and committing $100,000 to e-bikes, if we don't have a good solution, we're going to have to spend the same money next year to defend our capital investment. I'd like to find out what we're doing before we spend that money?
Mark, if we could, we would like to clarify the additional funding and how it's being allocated, because we're using the $100,000 figure to purchase e-bikes, but I think there's more than that, more to that. So can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to say that, the nonprofit has been through plenty of rocky times before, and we've been, almost a decade into figuring this out. Last fall, when we were 6 months into our presenting sponsor having discontinued or finished their contract, our board took a look at how much we would need in reserves to responsibly shut down the system, basically get out of the business if we need to. And the number they identified was $60,000. We've never gotten through the winter with that much money in the bank before. And so in September, when we really brought forward our need and request to city staff, the request was for closer to $300,000, a full replacement of our sponsorship model, acknowledging that was kind of fundamentally unreliable. Between now and then, as we've made it through this winter so far, and trying to just help chart out what our course could be, I produced a model showing we'd probably end 2020 with that exact $60,000 figure in the bank if we had only $185,000 in funding. That could put us all back in this exact same room in January of 2021 in this exact same situation. And so basically it was trying to, under the model that our board put in place, try to make sure that we're not only making it through the end of this calendar year, but especially with CU on board as a larger committed partner, planning through the end of the academic year of 2021, which also sees the system through its full 10 years of operation. And it's a sensible time for us to, between now and then, plan whether it's for a new system, for a new funding model. It gives us more time than just running it through New Year's of 2020.
All right, I have some questions. What, referring to the funding models, what kinds of ideas are on the table for something like that?
That's a great question. When we talk with cities that are, I call them, they're akin to Boulder, but they're not exactly peer cities. There are cities, as I've alluded to, that have very successful sponsorship models. All of those cities are larger and denser. And so it's hard. We look to them and we think, how could we emulate this? And then when we talk with, we've explored working with media buyers, and they tend to say, you're a pretty small city. The number of impressions you generate really isn't what you'd hope it would be. And that's a big thing that's changed since when the system started, and now is that almost all ads are being delivered, hyper-targeted and with better tracking on mobile devices. So it's still intriguing for someone to maybe pay to sponsor the program and have durable asset visibility downtown, but it's not as compelling as it might have once been. That's a good reason to look at it. And then in a lot of cities, there's either different ways that the either city or transit agencies are committed to it. I believe there are models too where there's the primary goal is a sponsorship and system revenue model, but the city or transit agency underwrites operating losses if they occur. To have some sort of safety net to protect the investment and to give the nonprofit the consistency, knowing that if they sign up a sponsor, they might not have to cancel 6 months later. So as far as what would work here, what we found long-term has been really helpful, it's really driven system use, has been these larger programs. And so, when companies bulk purchase passes for their employees, we have some great engagement around that. And I think the system both gets more use and more revenue than it would if we were just trying to court those employees individually. And then the same thing can be said for CU. It's a combination of relocating stations to campus, but then also CU stepping forward, the Environmental Center, and funding a pass program that's enabled us to really ratchet up the number of students using it.
Thank you. I have another question. What happens to the human-powered bikes once they're decommissioned?
That's a great question. What I know, I can speak to a little bit from what Denver B-Cycle's doing. So, again, separate nonprofit organizations, but we share a lot of information because we have comparable hardware. They are going to give about half of their fleet to a local nonprofit, and they're going to be repurposed to be individual bikes for people who could use them. That could certainly be a viable model here. Most of our bikes are still in great rideable condition, even though some of them are 4,000 miles into their life. And so that could work here, certainly. They're heavy, but they're very durable. Yeah. I did want to add one more thing from earlier when Councilmember Yates was speaking to Denver bike sharing. I think it might be important to point out that Denver bike sharing is closing the Denver B-Cycle system, but the nonprofit is remaining in operation while the city of Denver works out their regulations. So the regulatory environment has a lot to do with what any for-profit or nonprofit is choosing as their course forward at this point.
Thank you. And I have a couple more questions, and these are related to the e-bikes. So first of all, would the e-bikes utilize the same stations? So that's one question. And then because they're e-bikes, would there potentially be a possibility to have fewer stations? And yeah, so those are my questions on e-bikes.
Sure. Yes, it's basically the hardware provider we have right now, B-Cycle, makes e-bikes. One system we've gotten to look a little bit in at how it's been performing so far is Madison, Wisconsin. They're almost the exact same size system as we are here, and their use has like gone through the roof with e-bikes. So they're on course to potential triple their usage in 2020 that they had in 2018. The difference, a key difference, is that Madison's a larger, denser city. And home of track. So yeah, B-Cycle brand equipment, absolutely. If those bikes dropped out of the sky, they would plug into the stations right now, and anyone could check them out. We could choose how we price them. E-bikes can have a surcharge or not. And then with other vendors, the short answer is no, they would not plug into the stations.
And could the dockless component require fewer stations? I think that was the other question.
Yeah, because of the longer distance that you could travel possibly with an e-bike, would it have fewer stations?
Was your question if because of the longer distances they would require fewer stations?
Well, could it be possible that there would be a need for fewer stations?
I suppose so. I think if we got kind of clear on what the use case is that we were trying to serve, and potentially serving, I think when I think of serving longer distances, I certainly think of north of downtown all the way to North Boulder and south to South Boulder and then east as well. Clustering your, if they're not stations at that point, but just hubs, clustering them along multi-use paths as you'd intend for people to get in would certainly be a way. Mm-hmm. Thank you, DK. Yeah, let's see. We have looked at models of equipment that are either dockless but tethered, or the B-Cycle e-bike model that would plug right into our stations cannot be run docklessly. It is only a dock-based model.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, so coming back to your earlier clarification, I didn't quite get the clarification, which is you were talking about what you were spending the money on, that additional $100,000, and I didn't actually hear the explanation of how that would be ratioed between equipment versus operational sustainability.
I think of it as being almost fully operations, because in our mindset, we aren't looking to make we're not looking to purchase e-bikes. We're looking to demo them under a loan, perhaps, from Trek or B-Cycle. I mean, they're our equipment provider now and would love us to, eventually replace our equipment with the next generation of what they offer, or lease them under a shorter term. So also my mindset being that with this far into the system, all of our costs are operating the system. So
I guess I'm really trying to focus in here. Yeah. How much of that money would be allocated towards purchasing new equipment?
If it were purchase or lease, I'd say no more than $30,000 or $35,000.
Okay, great, thank you. Are we making comments, or where are we here?
We're asking questions still, but I think at this point, if we don't have any further questions, we can. Bob, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm confused on the numbers now, because I understand that you had a sponsorship from Kaiser was $80,000 a year, okay, and that precipitated this problem. So I'm having a hard time understanding how we go from an $80,000 loss to a $275,000 need. Can you break down the $275,000 about what you would spend for what? I understand. I think you talked about more than a 12-month cycle, so I kind of get that part of it. But let's just so we can have apples to apples. Can you just do 12 months and say, how much would it take to keep the ship afloat? Not buy new e-bikes, not do anything new, just keep doing what you're doing. why would that be more than, I know that we contributed some money already, right? We were contributing, what, 50,000 a year? Is that right? 50,000. So you were at 65, and 80,000 went away, so that gets me to 145. Get us from 145 to 275. What's that extra $130,000 going for?
Sure. I'll do my best to account all for this from my memory, but certainly some of it is planning longer than just operating through the very end of this calendar year. But then also we're being relatively conservative around sponsorships as it's gone down over time. We don't know necessarily if we're going to land another $80,000 sponsor or lose another $20,000 sponsor, so we're being conservative there. We're also budgeting pretty conservatively around system revenue, which, to tie back to the regulatory side of things, we've been doing this since 2017 when we haven't known if dockless bikes might land and cut into our revenue stream. So every year we've been basically projecting to get less, thinking that we might face competition. And this time, our board is taking this approach of saying, well, we don't know if scooters are coming, so we need to budget that our system revenue is going down as if they are.
We'll answer that question within the hour.
Okay.
I'd say uncertainty is not good for anybody, right?
Comment or final question?
Comment.
All right.
If I might. Anyway, I thought that fundamentally where Bob and Mark were going was a good place, which was, to say, yes, we want to support B-Cycle. We want to make sure the system stays in business and it's sustainable. But hey, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into what the next steps look like and go to TAB and have them take a look at that and say, okay, before making significant additional infrastructure investments, how is this going towards the long-term sustainability of the model for 1 to 2 to plus years? I mean, is that kind of more or less what you guys were saying?
I think that makes great sense, and if that's the consensus, we're happy to do that, to take that approach.
Council, how does council feel about that? Sam?
I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I really think we need to make sure to support B-Cycle at this moment of need. It's been around a decade, and not all of our transit options make money. I point out again that farebox revenues for RTD are roughly a quarter of their overall $700 million operating budget. And so it is the case that if we want to support options for transit, and this option, is 100,000 rides a year, it's 25 metric tons of avoided carbon emissions a year, presuming that it would be done with scooters, which are not as good as human-powered bikes or cars. I just want to make a pitch that we absolutely want to make sure that it can survive. I will point out that CU's jump here is massive. From $15,000 a year to being willing to put $110,000 a year towards this, I'm not going to quibble with them over 40, 45, or 50% because this is such a huge jump that it is, I would like us to participate in this. I will say about e-bikes, one of the reasons that Madison may see this big increase is it changes your perspective on getting around. So if people, some portion of these are business users who are using it for last mile connections or first mile connections, the difference with an e-bike is you don't arrive sweaty. Hills become much less of a concern. And so these are big, heavy bikes. I was a member for a year, and my challenge with them was they're big and heavy. An e-bike gets you around both the heaviness and the hilliness and the other challenges. So the reason that I'm really pretty, and I think TAB should weigh in, I don't disagree, before we allocate money for additional lease or purchase of equipment, I do want TAB to weigh in on this, but my personal opinion is that the e-bike changes people's perspective of what B-Cycle will be. And so one of the reasons, it's a decade in, and so you have to refresh and renew, and so one of the things might be that besides tourists and students, the perception of this as a travel option is that it's older and heavier and a little clunky. Whereas if they're pedal assist e-bikes, it may change a lot of that barrier to being able to do it. So I don't want to leave that out of the conversation, and I don't want to leave CU's willingness to contribute to this out of the conversation. So if we back off and CU backs off proportionally, I do want to reserve a conversation for TAB to have around the pros and cons of being able to do this. I don't know about reducing stations. There's a chicken and egg concept there, because you want people, when they park their bike, to have a short walk-ish to where they're going. So if you reduce stations, even though it's easier to get a longer distance, they may still have a longer walk if there are fewer stations. So I just want to put a full-throated support out for B-Cycle. It's clearly been a benefit to the community, and I think we need to make sure to at least give it a chance to, find the sponsors that can do it. I mean, there's a lot of tech companies in Boulder these days, and, some of them are expanding even beyond what they've announced to us as far as campuses, including Apple and Google and some other companies. So it's a long way of saying I really support B-Cycle. I think we need to at least make sure that they get through the next year. And I would like Tab to talk about what we might think about for Refresh to be able to kind of reinvigorate people's enthusiasm.
So that, I'll ask a question then, Rachel. That does raise a question for me with regards to the transit subsidies. So correct me if I'm wrong, transit is federally mandated. Is that correct?
Federally mandated. So ask the question a different way. Like, is it required? Is it
required? Yes.
Yeah, the Federal Transit Administration has districts, and they have allocations based on population and employment. And we receive that allocation through RTD. So that money is distributed formulamatic. There's formulas.
Formulaically?
Thank you very much. Sorry, 14-hour day. So yes, so that is. But there's no similar subsidy right now for micromobility from any agency.
That was my next question.
We looked.
And there is a local example, too, of how much we subsidize transit, and the HOP is a good example. Right now, the city subsidizes the HOP by $2.60 per ride, per rider. And it's also subsidized by RTD and also the university.
Okay, thank you.
As compared to what would be potentially the $1.65 allocation, which is $1.65 per ride.
Rachel.
The first thing I wrote down was, has TAB looked at this? And so I'm grateful that members of TAB came tonight to voice anything. But this whole thing has felt a little bit haphazard and clunky to me. Like, we had this study session set up for e-scooters and micromobility, and then we sort of tagged this on and kept building on it over the last, couple of weeks, I think. So it doesn't feel like we've had a thorough review and chance for somebody to look at this holistically. And also, I think it's a $1.45 subsidy for each, maybe under the new dollar amount. And I appreciated in TAB's annual letter that they were looking at the neighborhood eco passes and equity considerations. And I'm not sure, what demographics or socioeconomic status benefits mostly from subsidizing this. So I hope that TAB will look at that as well.
Aaron?
Well, just wanted to, Sam, thank you for the full-throated support. I just wanted to echo that I think by saying, look at this a little differently in no way detracts from, I think, Council's support of B-Cycle as an entity in the program you're implementing.
Any other comments? Junie?
I wanted to go back to Rachel's concern. Is it that these two things cannot coexist, e-scooters and e-bikes?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Can e-scooters and e-bikes coexist?
Absolutely.
I just need a little clarification, if that's okay, when the time presents itself.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand the motion. I'm new to this, so you can just be patient with me. I really appreciate it. So what I understood from the conversation tonight is we would proceed with, I believe it's the $185,000 mark to keep B-Cycle going. And that would not be to lease or buy or do anything with the e-fleet. It would just be to keep it going.
As a first step.
And then after that, we would spend quarter 2 and 3 working with TAB to understand what role E or the future of B-Cycle looks like. So tonight you're saying 185 to keep B-Cycle going and not the 275 to introduce the leases or what else with E. That'll come at a later date. And the clarification for me is we can keep going tonight and get this funding transferred over to B-Cycle to keep them going so that they're up and running past March 1st. And then also we'll go back to TAB, not in February because we have a pretty full agenda in February, but we go to them in March and start talking about what the process is to understand more of the details related to the E part of the fleet plus the future of the fleet.
So I believe that's right. And the one thing that I'm not sure that we have consensus on is the asking CU for more. I mean, I heard Aaron and Sam in support of the full-throated support, and others haven't weighed in on whether or not the support that CU is providing, going from 15,000 to 110,000, should be renegotiated. I don't think that's necessary. Rachel, and then Aaron, and then Sam.
I don't feel like we need to argue with CU. It's a fairly small amount of money for a short term, so I don't need to renegotiate it.
No, I don't either. The one thing I would just say, Carlos, that to what you said, it was not necessarily the specific number, but to say that do what it takes to keep the system healthy, and then, but don't start on major infrastructure investments, additional ones, without going through TAB first and coming up with a long-term plan. So I didn't hear that necessarily that was 185, but
Roger that.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, I agree with what Aaron said. I mean, you guys have to figure out what the number is. It sounds like there's a fair amount of conservatism built in this. I know there's some reserves for e-scooters. We're going to stick around. We're going to talk about that. You'll have the answer by 9 o'clock on that. As far as the dockless thing, we approved those regulations 2 years ago, and they haven't shown up. So I think the risk of that is probably relatively small. If they would have shown up, they would have shown up. And I get the fact you're trying to do more than a 12-month budgeting, but I'd say I'm fine with the 60-40 split for now, but maybe drive a little of that conservatism out. I don't know if it's 185, maybe it's 165, maybe it's 200. You guys will figure out what the number is, but let's just kind of do what it needs to be done to keep the ship afloat. Whatever that number is, you guys can do the math on that. Get 40% of that number from CU. And then kick it over to TAB for an evaluation of supplemental equipment, whether that's e-bikes or other things, and the future. And then maybe have TAB come back to us in 3 months, 6 months, whenever you guys are ready, and talk about what TAB's recommendation is.
Great.
Sam?
So just to give us a little perspective on that, say it is 185, just for discussion purposes, that would mean CU's portion's about 75, which would be a significant chunk of that. It reduces our nut to between 100 and 110,000. I would also say that if CU is willing to pay the difference, after we go through TAB and we're talking about how to improve the system, if CU is willing to pick up 40% of that, I think we need to really consider that as a serious kind of partnership offer, because that's a pretty significant chunk of whatever improvement we try and make. And the point of the improvement would be, I think, as you said, it's a pilot. It's to test, would it move the needle on demand at all? Because if it does, we have an interesting answer for how we might make the system more healthy.
All right. So does staff have what they need?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Real quickly, one thing that I think would be interesting to find out as you're looking at what e-bikes might do is, would it extend, instead of making the last mile connection, would it be the last miles connection?
And probably the latter.
I just wanted to say thank you for the hunting and the couch cushions exercise. It's great to see how you put that together.
That was right there. The credit should go right there at the CAC meeting.
We'll give a thank you for the question, but then the implementation.
I just imagined after we raised that at CAC at 8 o'clock on Monday morning that at SAM, at the staff agenda meeting at 10 o'clock that day, there was like a hat being passed around and Community Vitality threw in. Did the fire department kick in? I think they were the only ones I didn't see on the list.
Police, yeah.
It was the hat that was passed around. And thank you for that. Thanks very much. All right, e-scooters?
Yeah.
You need to get up and stretch, right?
Second inning stretch.
Okay.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thanks.
Good night.
All right, DK, go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, transitioning now to something that's very relative to B-cycle is micromobility. I know that's a term we've been slinging around. It's an industry term, but it does, it does represent a number of different types of vehicles. And so, just as a reminder, we are referring to micromobility. We are talking about both human-powered and electric-powered lightweight vehicles such as bikes and scooters. These shared devices could be dock-based, like B-Cycle is today, or dockless in that they don't require a docking station. And so the why in all this, why we're looking at this, and the overarching reason is to improve air quality and decrease greenhouse gases by reducing our dependence on motor vehicles, reducing SOV trips in the city, single occupancy vehicle. And the other reason is that many shared micromobility options are considered active transportation, which also provides a health benefit for users when they're getting around our city, they're getting exercise and being healthy. So since the moratorium, or as we've been referring to, the study period, it's been very helpful. Thank you very much for enacting that. It really has allowed us to dig deep on this whole subject and work closely with our partners in the community, and really very closely with CU Boulder, as they are a major partner, and then also with the Boulder Chamber too. It's been a great process, I think, and we've been very collaborative with them through the whole process, and including hosting of many demonstration events and conducting a community questionnaire. And we've also are thankful for the coordination with the micromobility providers. We've been very transparent about our process the entire time with all the for-profit micromobility providers. These are some of them, actually all of them, that we've coordinated with. And they've helped us understand the industry, and they've also participated in a lot of demonstration events. And through it all, we've bounced ideas and regulations and back and forth. And so we are definitely thankful for their partnership. And what's been interesting about this too is that some of these providers here, some of them do only scooters, and then some of them will do both bikes, e-bikes and scooters. So you get a combination. And so we want to recognize the opportunities with micromobility. They help provide transportation options, particularly as first and final mile transit solutions, which is an action item in our TMP. And there were certainly a large number of micromobility trips generated in 2018, 84 million trips nationwide. The 2019 data has yet to be released, so we don't know what that figure looks like, but we're imagining it probably doubled because there was an influx of additional vehicles deployed within on streets throughout the U.S. And the technology is evolving too. E-bikes are now equipped with a Lock 2 capability. As you recall from our licensing program that we put into effect in 2017, we wanted, and you can see the picture in the right-hand corner, we wanted to have a bicycle that was able to lock to a bike rack. We didn't want self-locking bikes installed or active around the city to be placed in crosswalks or sidewalks, areas where people could potentially get hurt. And the technology of particularly the e-scooter too is also changing. The wheels are getting bigger now. They're adding seats. Some come equipped with a helmet, as you can see in this picture, lower center of gravity. So they're responding to some of the issues that we are concerned about too. And there's ways in which we can park these more orderly within the city too, and looking at micromobility hubs where we're parking a combination of different types of vehicles. And then there's the challenges that still exist today. Of primary concern is the safety for our pedestrians. Safety for pedestrians on sidewalks and multi-use paths, the safety for the users on the streets, and we don't want to oversaturate our community with vehicles that are not being used. So having a demand-based cap in place is key. And issues with parking generally with them on the sidewalk. And so the next set of slides describes the highlights of our analysis in 5 primary areas of concern, which are safety, mode shift, sustainability, equity, and demographics. But first, we want to talk about the community engagement. A lot has been done. This time has allowed us to coordinate with all the community partners that you see up top there. And it's been a mixed review from all the different stakeholders about which direction we should go. Some are in favor of e-bikes. Actually, most all are in favor of shared e-bikes, and there's mixed reviews on e-scooters, and that comes out in both the questionnaire and through our conversations with our stakeholders. And specifically with TAB, we wanted to share their input. They do support the inclusion of shared bikes, e-bikes on a citywide basis, and some TAB members also supported a citywide program that would include e-scooters. But all TAB members had expressed support for a pilot program, including e-scooters, but limited to the East Boulder area in order to serve the business parks, such as Flatirons Business Park, East Walnut, and Airport Road. You see, the problem with some of these areas is that once you do get there by car, you're kind of stuck there. You can do walks, but to get to places for lunch or to run errands, it's hard to leave without a vehicle. And so the Chamber and TAB and staff are all very concerned about how do we provide micromobility options to these islands out there to help give people additional options for transportation other than their vehicle. And also, how do we influence first and final mile transportation? So we know that regional transportation is of a major concern. And so how would micromobility serve as that first and final mile solution to get to their place of employment? So I know this is not a very popular recommendation. It's difficult to make, and it's taken us months of analysis and internal and external outreach and coordination to get to this point. It's important to note, as Carlos mentioned earlier, that this recommendation is not just coming solely from transportation, but it's coming from many departments, including the police department, community vitality, the city's attorney's office, Parks and Recreation, risk management, the city's attorney's office, and the city manager's office. So I'll read the recommendation. In addition to Boulder bike sharing, B-Cycle, allow only commercial shared electric assist bicycle providers to operate within the city. Staff does not recommend allowing commercial shared e-scooter providers to operate within the city. And now we'll get into the slides of analysis. So of paramount concern is safety. This is a slide from Austin, Texas Public Health in cooperation with the CDC. Of the injuries that they analyzed, 1% of those folks that were riding an e-scooter was wearing a helmet, and 45% of those folks suffered a head injury. What is alarming is that almost 30% of people riding an e-scooter are injured on the first trip. Now, if they get past the first trip, probably going to be okay to get to the second and the third, but it's that first try on the e-scooter that could lead to a problem. And
DK, sorry to interrupt. This is percentage of people who are injured in some way, right? So in other words, 45% of the people who are injured on an e-scooter suffered a hand injury. 29% of the people who were injured on an e-scooter, it was their first trip.
Correct.
So
that's correct.
The pool here is all people who were injured on an e-scooter.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Over what timeline?
I don't recall the exact timeline, but it was several months.
I'll look while you're talking.
Thanks, Carlos. And the bottom pie chart helps us understand like the percentage of those that were injured at night, 40%, and actually 61% of those folks were injured during the day. And then we talk about alcohol use and e-scooter use combined is absolutely an issue. And so there has been a number floating around that the 79% of the injuries were people were impaired. That's not exactly true. It was of the 79% of patients admitted to the hospital that were tested for alcohol, almost half of those had a notable blood alcohol content. And that was from the BMJ study. And then from the Austin Public Health, again, 29% of those patients reported consuming an alcoholic beverage prior to crash. Yes, of course.
Do the two slides tie together? Like, I guess I would have thought that it was more at night because there was so much alcohol consumption implicated. But is it that, do those numbers go together? Are people day drinking and writing these things? Or does it, I'm trying to figure out how these two slides.
That certainly could be a possibility in some cases.
I was surprised by that as well.
No, it's a combination. I mean, we assume that a majority of the crashes that did occur at night, the people were drinking, but it's really hard to put the finger on that. But there is a split between the crashes. It's not just happening at night, but it's happening during the day and the night. Yeah.
Kind of a follow-up on that.
Sure.
Was there any data on that to correlate the number of crashes to the condition of the sidewalks and streets?
No. So the data around this, too, is really interesting because it's not necessarily systemized or systematic at this point. It's kind of all over the place. We have to kind of reach in different locations to find information we need to do, in order to analyze what we're seeing. And so does the state disrepair of a road lead to a potential crash? It's hard to say. We don't have access to a lot of the accident reports, so we don't know if it was a contributing factor. But if you look at some of the models, specifically of e-scooters, they do have a smaller wheelbase. And so at this point, we make the assumption that the condition of a road could affect how an e-scooter would operate.
You have about 8 more slides, so why don't you roll through those? You get about 5-7 minutes to get through that.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. So hold your questions until DK's done.
Thanks. So since 2010, there has been 4 bike share related fatalities. Yet since 2018, there has been 21 e-scooter share related fatalities. This to us was very alarming, which was pretty much the impetus, the primary impetus of a recommendation. It definitely affects our Vision Zero goals, and so that is of concern. And so we are making the prudent decision to say this is not a risk worth taking. Staff did conduct an analysis of the e-scooter fatalities, and 16 of them did happen at night, 76, while 5 of them happened during the day. And most of the crashes appear to be caused by the user of the scooter, making a sudden turn into traffic and running a red light, or falling off a scooter and into traffic. And we're comparing bike share to scooter share, and this is a typical way in which we measure exposure. And per 100 million miles, if you look at the fatalities for bike share, it's been a little over 1 fatality per 100 million miles. And so if you look at the scooters, we're talking about 23.4 per 100 million miles. Okay, I'm going to move on to mode shift. And so one of the benefits, the presumed benefits of e-scooters is that they are providing a mode shift. And so what we did is we analyzed the evaluation reports from 6 different cities across the U.S., and we paid special attention to this question. If an e-scooter had not been available for your last trip, how would you have made the trip? And you can see the split here. And when you condense that down, essentially it's replacing 37% with the prime vehicle trips, most of those being TNCs. But we're also replacing active transportation trips, which definitely goes against our mode share goals and our desire to have a healthy community. And then we look at e-scooters and sustainability. So in 2018, there was a study that was done that showed that the e-scooters were lasting around 28 days, and so quick turnover. But the companies are claiming that they are improving the lifespan, which is a good thing. But we haven't seen the data on that in terms of how long. A lot of them say it's, now they're lasting 3 months, now they're lasting 6. But see, they're keeping the vehicle ID private in the data specifications, so we don't know for sure. And so we can't make an assumption that that is a true statement. In terms of e-scooter operations, they are resulting in a net increase in greenhouse gas emissions, and you can see there, and really it's the manufacturing of the e-scooter and then also the rebalancing of the e-scooter that comes into play in terms of increasing the GHG gases. So if the companies decided to start requiring zero or lower emission rebalancing fleets, that would help, and then also reducing the distances for rebalancing fleets to travel would help out with that a lot. And then equity and demographics. All the micromobility companies will provide a set percentage of the fleet to be deployed in underserved neighborhoods, but when the discount memberships are available, they are rarely accessed, unfortunately. For example, only 6% of the trips in Portland were accessed by underserved community members. Really, we needed better promotion for these affordability programs and the cities to augment that outreach. But surveys show that most people using e-scooters are white, young men, and that they earn more than the median income. And they tend to be less than 35 years old. Okay, thanks. And so regardless of which way City Council decides to go, staff has prepared a set of regulations to govern both e-scooters and e-bikes. Before you are the regulatory categories and some of their specific components. The draft regulations were constructed based upon stakeholder input, NACTO guidelines, other city programs, and input from the micromobility providers themselves. And so it's not our intent to create a set of regulations that prohibit shared micromobility operations, but rather to find the balance of what works best for our community and the private operator to maximize the potential. And so this is our proposed approach. We want to integrate the elements of the current dockless bike share licensing program, take out those things that were prohibitive for the companies to do business, and adjust some of those regulations. We propose to continue our public investment in Boulder Bike Share, and we encourage the regional coordination. This is really important for our first and final mile solutions, particularly with regional transportation. We need other communities that are embracing micromobility so that a trip on the other end is being satisfied by a vehicle other than a car. And part of this process, depending upon City Council's direction tonight, would be to conduct a request for proposal process to select a vendor or vendors, depending upon which way you guys want to go. And I think we're almost done here, right?
Yeah, we just want to give a minute or two, if it's okay, to let the tab members also fill in the blanks before we start, if that's
great.
okay.
Alex and Mark, please come up. State your name.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Mark McIntyre, Transportation Advisory Board. So this is kind of an awkward position for me tonight. And I say that because as a board, TAB, we had a unanimous vote to disagree with staff's recommendations regarding e-scooters. And so rather than to focus on that, I want to focus on a prior unanimous vote where we agreed with staff, and that was to approve our current 2019 Transportation Master Plan update. And as stated, and as a council, you guys unanimously approved our 2019 Transportation Master Plan update as well. And I refer to that because the goals, as stated in the TMP, are, and I quote here, our transportation system will be safe, be equitable, be reliable, provide travel choices, and support clean air and our climate commitment. So, and I state those because being safe, providing choices, and meeting our climate commitment should be the guiding principles for the decision-making in regard to e-scooters and other micromobility programs. But they're really so related, especially those three, choices, safety, and meeting our climate commitment, that they're just intertwined. So as DK said, our primary tool to meet our climate commitment is getting people out of cars, shifting the mode. And if we, it's the board's consensus that a straight up ban on operating e-scooters as a micromobility tool in the city does not help us meet those goals. So as a city, as a group, as TAB, we talk at length about first and last mile solutions, yet we have effectively over the last couple years blocked all dockless bike share possibilities and e-scooter possibilities, while our peer cities have actually been implementing either pilot programs or simply regulating and allowing and managing these modes. And I spent some time talking with the senior planner in Fort Collins in charge of their micromobility program. So they've been operating an e-scooter pilot since late October, so essentially 3 months into the program. But before they implemented this program, they partnered with their university. So this is all very familiar. I mean, Fort Collins, similar size university, a little different geography, but a lot of things are very similar. They partnered with the university in developing the regulations and selecting a vendor. And they're 3 months into it now. They have about 40,000 rides to date, all winter rides now, about 9,000 unique riders, and they're expecting this to pretty dramatically increase as bike ridership and everything else increases in the summer months. They also have reported an initial set of complaints. As when you introduce a new element into a traffic situation, you always get that. But their complaints have really diminished pretty dramatically. And that's partly due to a pretty strict set of regulations regarding parking, speed limits, geofencing in specific areas. They do allow them in their downtown area, but not on the sidewalks in downtown. But the other thing that they did, and this is something Sam and I talked a little bit about the other day, was to try to create clarity, they pretty much said a bicycle, an e-bike, and an e-scooter, in terms of where you can go, is pretty much the same thing. So there's clarity there in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. If you can't ride a bike on the sidewalk in a zone, if it's a dismount zone for a bike, it's a dismount zone for a scooter, et cetera. They have no reported injuries to date. And so in general, they consider this, their initial movement on this to be a success. As a board, we discussed where there are some great needs for micromobility, and we really discussed the East City area, Flatirons Industrial Park, the need there for people to connect to transit, coming in on Arapahoe or other routes with somewhat infrequent bus service, and then the ability to go to lunch. It's a lunch desert out there for for a lot of those people. And so, we did support the idea of a pilot somewhere outside of downtown. And we gave that to staff as a possible way to move forward, other than just saying no. And the other thing I want to say is that I want us to be aware about the way we talk about e-scooters and the questions we ask about them, because it's many times it can be completely different than for other modes. So life cycle concerns, for instance. Life cycle concerns are real, and life cycles are being improved with e-scooters because it's an economic benefit to the e-scooter company. But we don't ask the person driving a single occupancy vehicle to explain when their car will magically make up for their climate impacts. We don't hold them to this standard that we do other micromobility modes. So just finally, we also believe that the safety concerns pointed out by staff are real, but there will be crashes and bad behavior in every mode. And I know I'm going to speak in absolute terms here versus number of miles traveled or whatever, but I want to remind us that every day, 100 people or more die in car crashes. And that does not include, the 100 does not include the 17 pedestrians killed every day by cars and trucks, those are the numbers from your report. So again, and I know of I can't state this for sure, but I know of no e-scooter killing anyone other than themselves. So we don't have e-scooters crashing into pedestrians and killing them, or cars and killing someone in a car. So there is a difference in the way we talk and evaluate these micromobility solutions. And I think we just need to be aware that we tend to kind of give some other solutions a pass, cars, and we evaluate these solutions differently. So that's the conclusion of my remarks.
Thanks, Mark. Carlos, you look like you wanted to add something to that.
Absolutely not. Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mark.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got Adam and then Junie.
Sure. Just for
Aaron.
Full awareness, it was the last council that actually unanimously approved the TMP by 7-0. So just so everyone is on the same page there, that was not this council.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that earlier, as I asked, you mentioned that scooters and e-bike could coexist. And I understand as well, you mentioned the emission between e-scooters and bike, and it's much higher. But I can see as well that it is half of cars, the emission. So to me, that was very important to see that. And I definitely support tabs on the pilot program and the regulation system, because I think it goes back, when I was looking at your slides as well with the 1%, 1% with not that one, but with the helmet. So I think my question is, how can we regulate for the safety concerns that you have, because they are important. And the thing is, people who die in cars, that's not something, it's very hurtful. We don't want people to die. We want to keep people safe. So how can we ensure that we protect people while allowing this opportunity for the community? And also you mentioned equity, which is something that is very important to me and to a lot of us here as being part of GARE. What can we do to ensure that we infuse that equity within that program so that people of different socioeconomic can have access? So to me, I want to look at more the opportunity, because we can say, yes, there is a safety concern, and it is valid. We want every person to be protected. And I think what you said earlier about Vision Zero, you're dead on. We don't want any person in this community to suffer any type of injury. But at the same time, we want to create this opportunity. And how can we do that? And that's where I am today. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ginny. I agree with those statements. I did have one question here. So I definitely get your points about concerns about safety. But I think, really a key way to look at this is in terms of relative risk, right? Because cars, as Mark eloquently pointed out, are not safe, right? And they cause many, many injuries. So the question is would introducing e-scooters make the relative safety of our community, our transportation users, worse? And so what I'm wondering is, like, I know that some other cities that have tried this have found that the safety concerns are that the safety of the mode is not worse than other modes. So looking at Portland, for example, right, which is a city that we have a lot of shared values with, and they did a pilot, and their health department evaluated it and said, you know, we don't see that the injury rates necessitate shutting this down. We should continue, and so they started back up again. So anyway, where's the discrepancy there between like our analysis and some kind of peer cities analysis of the safety issues involved?
So, you know, the evaluation reports are all different. There are some stories of success, and there's other stories where they haven't experienced it. And so I guess you can draw from whichever evaluation report you'd like to find where the successes or where the issues are. And we were focused on finding out where people were getting hurt, and because it is a real possibility. And from our research, that e-scooters over bike share that's the primary essence of our evaluation here, is higher risk than bikes. Mm-hmm.
Bob and then Mark.
Sounds like we've gone into comments. Is that okay?
I have
okay, then
questions.
I'll yield until we're to comments.
Yeah. You've got comments? Yeah, I have a question. One of the first slides that maybe it was the first slide that you put up there, showed the evolution of scooters.
Okay.
I think very first, it was like black and purple.
Evolution of scooters. Oh, this one.
That one right there, the bottom right. I find it really interesting that that's starting to look like a bike. And it's a scooter. So I guess my question is what is the evolution? You said that they're starting to get bigger wheels and getting saddles, and what time frame was that, and how much more evolution can you expect?
That's how fast this whole industry is evolving. You know, a lot of the companies that started out in 2018, they've got different models today. They have been working on the robustness of their vehicles, and they've moved from hard rubber to wheels. Some of them, they're all different. There's several different providers, to more pneumatic, suspension in the wheels, so air-filled tires. Some have shocks. Sometimes a battery can be taken out for charging. Other times it's left in. Now there's a variety. But I think what some of the companies are hearing and what we're seeing as a result of some of the crash statistics is that it's the high center of gravity that's associated with the typical e-scooter today, the stand-up, and the smaller wheels that make it more prone or more susceptible to being involved in a crash. And so a lot of the companies not a lot of them, I shouldn't say, but there's so much technology evolution with this right now, and this is one company that appeared in 2019. There's actually a couple companies that have come out in 2019 that offer a larger wheel, sit-down option, and then some of them have the helmet that is as part of the device itself. And so there's no pedals on this. There's no chain drive, but there is yeah, it's hard to see in the
Worth mentioning, there's no pedals. So right now the dividing line in other cities is whether it has pedals or not. Los Angeles is going through a debate about classifying these, and the crank and pedal are the dividing line, is the short answer.
That's correct. Thanks, Carlos.
Yeah, sure, it's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And so in your analysis and your search for data, did you look at what the dynamics are basically of the person scooter system versus the person bike system? And I was trying to understand that, and I'm just curious to see if you all looked at that and included that in some of your analysis.
So I'm going to make sure I get the question right. So the question is, how do people riding bicycles and people using e-scooters interact together?
No, it's the system and how people get hurt.
Okay.
Right. So when a person on a scooter crashes, the forces acting on that are going to be different from when a person on a bike crashes.
So I think part of it is that you're giving up your ability to self-propel a device versus being fully reliant on a device that is electric powered. And so e-scooters are able to create a sustained speed with the push of a button, and whereas a bike share, e-bike, you have to pedal in order to get the juice in order to go. So I think there is something definitely evident in how it's propelled and the sustained speed of it, and then also the design of the device today.
So I'll add just one thing. We don't know. I wish I could tell you. I was in Denver at the city council meeting a year and a half ago when I had my consulting firm having this exact same conversation. And we looked at all the data that was available at the time, which was less than now. And you're asking all of the same questions, the right questions. But I can tell you, going through that, we don't know, right? I worked on the downtown Denver access and mobility plan. And I can tell you that the data doesn't slice it enough to answer these questions. The reports that come in through the hospital that eventually gets filtered into these reports, depending on who writes them and who funds them, there's a bias. Councilor Brockett said, and that's true, there's depending on if Lyft funds some of these studies, so you have to trace the money back to who's doing the studies. I would not feel comfortable as a professional telling you tonight that there's one way to decide whether they'll be safe and unsafe. I think that there's a lot of questions out there that we don't know. And I would hate to be on the record tonight referencing one study or another. We just don't know. And I wish we did, but we don't.
We're doing our best to piece together what information is available today. It's hopeful that NACTO's 2020 Micromobility Report, National Association for City Transportation Officials, which produced the last report, will provide some clarity around the different types of vehicles, their design, and crashes and injuries and also usage.
So just one more question, and then I'll go to Rachel, sorry. So is it safe to say then that to date, the data is kind of cobbled together and not entirely reliable?
Yes.
Thank you. Rachel.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say I think the best way for us to get data is going to be to pilot it here because we don't have all the data, and I suspect that we might be in line with places that do have really good infrastructure and paths and things like that. So my question is on if we do pilot it, and I understand it would be Flatirons Park area, East Boulder. And I have ridden, I enjoy e-scooters, I've ridden them, so I know generally how they work, but I was trying to think of how that would work like with geofencing. So I am out in the industrial park and I want to scoot over to Wendy's for lunch or something. I park it. Usually when I park it, like in another city, somebody takes it. So I want to make sure I can get back to the industrial park, first of all. And second, how is it that nobody's going to be able to pick it up and take it, outside of the pilot area? So I just want to understand if we pilot it, how we can be sure that is it only a certain number of people who have jobs in those parks can use them, or what does that look like?
Well, a lot of details to work out around the usage, who's able to use them in those business parks, and the round trip aspect. Do they get picked up by someone else who has an app on it too? So that's a question. Council can pick whichever area they would want to pilot this program. And then also we can talk about geofencing that particular area so that if the e-scooter was to leave that boundary, then the power would then go off on the e-scooter. It would still be able to be ridden manually, but essentially if you went outside that line, then the e-scooter would power down.
But to get outside of the desert, the lunch desert, you kind of have to leave there. So
I was want to say we're referring specifically to. Okay. We weren't really, I was referring to the Flatirons Industrial Park area, but certainly the whole goal would be to get people from the park to Wendy's, although I don't see you going there. But anyway, it would be a broader area than just the park.
Okay, so just something I think maybe we need to think through. And then, by piloting it somewhere like that, I think we can also look, I assume, and I guess I'm asking, wouldn't we expect that the mode shift numbers would change? Like if we're specifically looking at people who are in that desert and drive to lunch, and their alternative is not going to be walking to Snarfs. Thank you for that. It's so much better. They're almost surely going to be changing into a more active mode, if we're going to call these active, right?
E-scooters aren't active modes; they're more passive because it doesn't require.
Okay, so but they're going to be going from driving to not driving and not walking, right? Thank you for that, Carlos.
So yes.
Oh, I'll be a lot clearer now because my question to you, maybe there's no answer to it. How are you looking into enforcement? And I think it goes back to what Rachel said, because I've been to DC, I've lived in DC, and people do leave these scooters around. So if in Boulder we want to be safer and people not to trip on them, what can we do to ensure enforcement? And also you mentioned in your slides there were 21 deaths from scooters. And I think my question for you would be, what were the geographic locations and what were the characteristics of these roads? Because I would imagine that probably plays a role into why there's so many fatalities. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond to the enforcement piece, Junie? Okay, absolutely. And so for your earlier comment around the helmet use, I would say that the micromobility providers, all of them have been very enthusiastic and encouraging around getting their users to use helmets. Getting them to wear the helmet, the user itself, is another thing. There could be a regulation or an ordinance that require people who ride e-scooters to wear a helmet. But working very closely with PD and also code enforcement, it's difficult to allocate enforcement resources towards enforcing rules upon e-scooters due to the other various obligations they have when they're on patrol. We want our officers out on the arterials catching speeders, because when you are involved in a crash at a high speed, there's a severe or an increased chance of a severe injury. And so to be very strategic about how we use our resources is important. And so, and then the piece around understanding how the crashes have taken place. And again, when we did this analysis, we found that, I think it was right here, there was 76% of those crashes happened at night. And so a regulation around curfew of operation would be helpful. So we would say, potentially hours of operations for e-scooters may be from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever the appropriate time is for that. And so that would, I think, eliminate potentially some of the not being seen on our streets because it is a smaller vehicle. And then also hopefully eliminate some of the crashes that include impairment, alcohol impairment as well. And then we're going to talk about this in a couple weeks about where they should be ridden, right? And so if we find out tonight what council would like to do, a couple weeks from now we'll come back and discuss what are the appropriate locations, the facilities. Should they be allowed on multi-use paths? Should they be allowed on sidewalks, the street, or in the bike lane? So that's a future conversation. I hope that helps to answer your question. Okay, thank you.
So one more question, and then we'll move to providing our direction. All right, then. Would somebody like to kick it off? Sam. And then Bob.
So this is a pretty complicated one. It's complicated by a couple things in my mind. One is the safety concerns. 20 times the accident rate per mile driven versus bikes is notable. Aaron, I just looked up Portland, just an FYI. They ran a 4-month pilot. Out of that, they had 176 emergency room visits in a 4-month pilot. They said there were many more accidents than this, but most of them didn't require emergency room visits, but 176 in 4 months. So Portland has not said these things are okay. They have set up a year-long pilot starting in 2019, going to April 2020, to get better data and to evaluate this more seriously. The short-lived lifetime is a huge concern, right? Because if you compare it to bikes or e-bikes or other alternative modes, which get people out of cars as well, that really short lifetime, the embedded carbon emissions in building them, battery disposal, everything that goes along with that is of great concern compared to what I think are longer-lived options. And the fact that many of these are not used for last mile, first mile connections. Many of them are used as toys. Many rides are taken between Friday evening and Sunday morning, and you go down to Denver and you can watch them being used as toys in some of the plazas down there and not being used to connect. They're just being taken for joy rides, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not actually solving a connectivity problem that we have. So when it comes to the East Boulder concept, I'm pretty open to that. So I've worked out there for 13 years. I know very well what that area functions like. And I would make it everywhere east of Foothills, actually, to be honest, because some folks will want to go to Baseline. There are some restaurants there, but there's also Walnut Cafe, and there's the stuff out there. So I would start east of Foothills and see how it worked and take some measurements of injuries, and that would be mostly replacing car trips, and I do believe that. If there are scooters out there, I've ridden them too. I find them to be much more dicey as a mode of transport than a bicycle. The handlebars are short and narrow. The wheels are small, so potholes are going to be a bigger deal. You can easily end up jerking the short handlebars around and going pretty quickly one way or another, but that's not to say that people won't get good at them and be safer as they gain experience. So I'm interested in the possibility of a pilot, but I think having them downtown or on campus as the first place that we start would expose us to a lot of potential injuries. And so because there's such safety concerns, I really would like to see it out east first, where it's mostly business focused. There are a lot of people out there. There's roughly speaking 40,000 employees in East Boulder. It's second only to downtown as far as the concentration of employees during the day. So I think that's a good place to start, and I think we want to monitor. Portland, they point out the upsides to them as far as replacing car trips and so on, but they also acknowledge the downsides, which is why they did a second pilot. So if we're saying Portland's a comparison city, I think we should say that they've been cautious about it as well, and that they have paid close attention to things like emergency room visits, crashes, and the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. So I could support doing a pilot. I want us to go really slow and make sure that we're looking at the data a couple, 3 times in the first year so that we learn what we can learn. I think that's the best suggestion for where to do it in town if we're going to undertake it at all.
Bob. And then Aaron.
I'm going to support the staff recommendation and not even have a pilot in East Boulder, and I'll say why. First of all, I went up to Fort Collins myself and met with the folks in downtown Fort Collins on January 10th. And a couple things I learned from them. First, the geofencing does not work. It simply, technologically, does not work. It's supposed to be rideable in certain places and not other places. They said it doesn't work for beans. So anybody who wants to rely on geofencing should know that that's the real-world experience in Fort Collins. Second, they picked one vendor for their pilot, and that was Lime, and Lime is now in the process of going out of business. Oh, I'm sorry, Bird. Excuse me, Bird. Thank you. But Bird is, I think, having some pretty severe problems. And I think, for good or for bad, we're catching the tail end of this. I think the peak on scooters happened probably 6 or 12 or 18 months ago, and I think we're now seeing the long tail. And I think we need to look to other cities for this experimentation rather than experimenting with our own residents. Cities as diverse as New York City, Chattanooga, and Breckenridge, and lots of other cities, you can Google it, have banned these scooters. They're willing to take a step back and let cities like Portland experiment with their residents, and they're waiting for this data. And they have taken a cautionary view of this. They're concerned about the health and safety of the residents. Could you put up the graph that shows the alternatives, what people would do if they weren't on scooters? Yeah, that one. So this is touted as a way to get people out of their cars, but let's take a look at that. If this is asked of people who are in cities that are renting e-scooters, what would you do if you didn't have an e-scooter? Well, you see only 13% of them actually said that they would drive a car. The rest of them were cannibalizing transit, biking, walking by far and away is the biggest. And so people would go back to walking if they didn't have, and so I think Sam's observation that to a large extent these are being used as toys as opposed to truly a last mile solution is absolutely true. I get the fact that if we piloted this in East Boulder, there's probably less drinking because not many drinking opportunities in East Boulder, and if we limit it to daytime use, maybe there'd be even less of that. But we also, I think, need to be realistic that people are not going to use helmets. If this is truly a last mile, do we really expect people to walk around with a helmet, take it from their home on the bus, get off the bus, get an e-scooter, put the helmet on, and take it to the last mile of work, hang on to that helmet, and then get at the office, and then get back on a scooter, get back to the bus, and get back home? I think the answer is no. And I think Junie asked a really good question about, how are we going to enforce whatever rules we put in place? Our cops are already overextended right now fighting crime and getting the bad guys. And I don't think that we want to divert our police officers to giving people tickets for not wearing helmets or riding on the sidewalks or doing whatever thing that we put in place there. So I think that that an East Boulder pilot, while it sounds tempting, is probably not going to get us a whole lot of benefit. I'll just close by saying that I am so impressed by that 20 times fatality rate. When Mark read off the goals of the Transportation Master Plan, I couldn't help but notice that the first word was safety, safe. And that's our number one obligation as council members to our community, is the safety of our community. Transportation alternatives are great, and we should certainly pursue them as long as they're safe, but we shouldn't let anybody hurt themselves or, God forbid, kill themselves on these scooters. I keep coming back. Those of you who were on council last fall, remember that brother and sister who came in and stood right here and told us the story of their sister who left a Coors game. I don't think she was intoxicated. She was leaving a Coors game. They had a long walk back to their car, and so instead of getting the car, they jumped on the scooter, and she caught an edge, and she fell down. And I think she's still in a coma. They say that she's brain damaged. She's effectively no longer with us. And in my opinion, one death is one death too many. That's why we call it Vision Zero, because our goal is to make it zero. And it seems to me that if we are going down this path and allowing people, we've seen the statistics from Portland, to go out there and hurt themselves in the sake of maybe an alternative mode of transportation, we're not living up to our standard of Vision Zero, which is to reduce injuries and deaths, not to provide opportunities for those. So I think we need to apply the precautionary principle here, and I think that we need to apply safety. If other cities want to experiment and give us the data, I'm happy to receive it, but I'm not willing to gamble with the lives of the people in Boulder.
Mark, and then Rachel.
Well, first, I'm very deeply disappointed to find that I appear to be outside of the core demographic for riding e-scooters. I wasn't aware, but now I am. I support the staff recommendations on many of the same bases that Bob just articulated. A 22 times, it's actually 22 times difference in fatality rate is astonishing to me and really not acceptable. And a 25 times difference in the rate of emission over bikes. And the concept of a 28-day useful life for these devices, even if it goes to 6 months with new developments, our bikes in our bike program are lasting 10 years. So now you're at 5% of the useful life of our bike if, in fact, the useful life of these scooters is improved from what it is today. And lastly is the issue of enforcement. It's not going to be enforced. And that means we're going to have e-scooters on sidewalks, and other safety considerations arise from that. I agree with what Bob said. I'd rather put a hold on it. If we get contradictory data that indicates that these devices are safer than we assume, or that the information tells us they are today, we can revisit it. But I am not attracted even to a pilot program at this point. I really don't want to do. I like experiments. I like experimentation, but not in terms of. I don't want to pay for it with hospital visits and emergency room visits on our population. So I support the staff recommendation entirely.
Rachel?
I'm going to push back a bit on the notion that we would be experimenting with lives in Boulder in some sort of devious way, because what we're doing is getting people out of cars, and people are dying in cars and from cars. So it's not a situation where we can only compare the scooters to bikes. I think a proper comparison also includes cars, and we need to look at the fatality rates there and the emissions rates there. And so it's pretty unfair to only compare bikes and scooters. And we're seeing right now that there's a clamoring for it in East Boulder and elsewhere. And I think that's because the solutions that we have there are not working for many people for lunches. Like the heavy B-cycle bikes, if they're out there, are not getting high utilization, I don't think. So I'm supportive of the pilot. I think it's going to save lives, not cost lives, and I'm not insensitive to an individual person's injury in Denver, and don't want to be read as saying that, but every day in this country we have people dying in cars, and our goal is to move people out of cars, and a small pilot to see if that works is favorable and progressive, and to me it's what Boulder's about. I think we are creative and leading edge, and I would like to see us continue in a safe, thoughtful way, and I think a lot of us have ideas for ways that we could make a pilot safe. We could have people in the office parks get lessons before they get their passes. And also just want to mention, I think that we have bird representatives here today who could maybe clarify if they are going out of business or not.
Aaron?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. I agree with everything that Rachel just said. I did just look, I have no idea really about Bird, but there's a news article from yesterday that said they just raised additional money and bought another company. It's odd. Seems like they're still going. But can you go to the slide on alternatives, like what scooter users would have used otherwise? There it is, right there. So clearly not every trip would replace a car trip, but I just want to point out the TNC category there. So that's the people who would have gotten a ride share is at 24%. And the ride shares, typically you're driving 2 miles for every 1 mile that somebody travels or more, right? So the TNCs are actually the biggest category in terms of driving and miles traveled. And I thought, Rachel, so that's 24% of that alternative and 13% on personal vehicles. So not 100% replacing car trips, but those are pretty substantial numbers. And to Rachel's point that when you're not in a car, then you're not in a mode that's dangerous to yourself, but that cars are also dangerous to other people, as Mark pointed out, right? So that if you're doing alternatives to car, then you're making kind of the system safer for other folks as well. I think the way to approach it would be to look at where the safety issues have happened and work on mitigating those. So we saw that first-time riders are a large percentage of injuries, and I think if we're focused on East Boulder, so I thought Tab's recommendation was great. I thought you all did a great job. which is in East Boulder, it'd be less tourists and more reusers, I imagine. And so there's more of an opportunity to train people, to give them lessons, and how it works. And if you restrict the hours as well, a lot of I think 75% or something of the fatalities were nighttime related. So if you restrict the hours, then you're talking about daytime, and I'm guessing there'll be a fair amount less drinking involved, right, because of where you are and at the time of day. So if you did a pilot that addressed where the largest causes of accidents have been, then I think you could come up with something that would probably be substantially safer than the current transportation system for your average user. So I think it's worth giving it a try in that kind of business-focused area of East Boulder.
Adam?
So I kind of land somewhere in between the two developing narratives here. I also agree that this doesn't seem ready for prime time, just with the amount of unknowns and the amount of inability to control it the way that we would like to. But I'm still open for the concept of a pilot program. Maybe in a year we look at this again and see where the industry is at and what changes have been made, and if it looks like it's trending towards a much safer environment. Because I agree, right now, like the injury data is kind of startling to me, and that's coming from one of those people who's slightly under 35 and white, and a dude. Yeah. So from the core demographic,
Prime target.
Yeah, from the core demographic here, I would not set foot anywhere near one of those things. I'm going to get injured just by tripping over it. So it's not a major interest to me at this very moment, but I'm very open to looking at it again a little bit down the line to see what the improvements are in the industry. It seems very much like one of those move fast, break things industries. It was designed to be that, and we're still in the breaking things part. And once we stop being in that part, it could be a really viable alternative that we're all hoping it will be, but right now, it still feels a bit broken.
Sam.
I just want to inject a little bit of data that I pulled from the internet just now. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, vehicle crashes, including pedestrians and cyclists who are killed. So the number of fatalities is about 1.25 per 100 million miles traveled. So it is still in the same range as bicycles, but 20 times less than the reported fatality rate for e-scooters per mile traveled. So for what that's worth, I just thought I would inject a little bit of context here. Yes, cars kill people. We're well aware of that, but there's also many, many, many vehicle miles traveled in automobiles as well. So for what it's worth, the rate is about 1.25 per 100 million miles traveled, fatalities of all types involving automobiles.
Junie, would you like a weigh in?
I have already.
Okay,
Remember?
great.
Thanks.
Thank you. So if there are no other comments, I will weigh in. I'm kind of where Adam is. Not kind of, I am where Adam is. And probably the biggest reason is that photograph of the evolution of e-scooters. To put people out there at by 55th and Arapahoe on these scooters currently. So I ride my bike on the sidewalks out there. I know I'm not supposed to, it's a commercial area, but I ride it out there because it's really unsafe to be on the bike lane. And not only do I ride it on the sidewalk, but I ride it on the wrong side of the road on the sidewalk. And the sidewalk is in really poor condition. So imagine somebody going from Flatirons Park in the heart of the park trying to get over to Snarf's. They have to come out of the park, and then somehow they either ride the wrong way on the bike lane on the street, or they get on the sidewalk, which is really windy and in really poor condition. They get out to 55th and Arapahoe, which is a really high accident rate. I think one of the higher ones in the city, 55th and Arapahoe. They have to cross that, and then they're on the multi-use path or on the wrong side of the sidewalk. Again, going on a windy sidewalk. And if not, they have to cross Arapahoe to get over to Snarf. So it's not real safe conditions. It sounds like a really great idea, but I don't think it's ready for prime time. I would wait until the scooters have evolved into something that lasts longer, has a lower center of gravity. I believe that's probably one of the reasons they're putting seats on them. And I'd be open to it, having a discussion about a pilot out there after they evolve further. Carlos?
Thanks. So it's 9:05, and there is another piece of the direction that we were asking for this evening, which really is related to e-bikes. So there's a second part of this tonight was related to e-bikes. So there's e-scooter and e-bike, and so just want to make sure that we don't leave off that part as part of the conversation. Yeah.
So in other words, if council decided, thank you.
You got
it. Whichever direction council goes, if they choose e-scooters or does not choose e-scooters, there's still the option of looking at e-bikes as an alternative as well, as part of a shared micromobility program from a private provider.
Well, I have a question about that. Refresh our collective memory. Yeah. We did allow dockless e-bikes with certain constraints on them, and no one has shown up, correct?
I can speak to that. So in 2017, we did adopt the dockless bike share licensing ordinance program. And it was a time when the industry, specifically one of the companies was Lime, was producing these self-locking bikes. And we had a lot of concern about these bikes being left in all different places. And so as part of the ordinance, we required the lock too. And another piece of that ordinance, because we were trying to be delicate going into this new micromobility mode, is we had an introductory fleet of around 150 if you included electric assist, and it was too low. And so the new regulations that we've drafted increase that fleet starting number up to about 500, with options to increase the fleet if they meet the demand-based cap. That is 2 rides per day per bike. If we're achieving that with that fleet, then we increase it further. If we're not, then we don't. And so we've taken I think the important elements of the dockless bike share licensing program, and we've fused it into this new regulatory scheme that we've created for the future micromobility program. So we're taking the old, putting it away, taking the good stuff out, and putting it into the one where we think it's going to work and be not prohibitive, where it would actually work for the providers to come in and do business in the city.
So help me understand, is that change a staff level change, or is that change going to come to council for approval?
That would come to city council for approval.
What's the timeline?
So that's in March.
In March.
Yeah. So the current ordinance is will sunset in August of 2020, this year, and so we can extrapolate those elements of the current ordinance and infuse them into the new one that you would then have a couple readings to consider.
And has TAB weighed in on this?
TAB has not weighed in on the regulations itself, because we're waiting for a city council direction on which way we would move with the micromobility program. But we are planning to take this to TAB in February.
Great. So you're looking for an answer from us on, do we want TAB to look over your proposed changes and then bring it to us after they've had a look in March?
Right. The actual ordinance will take a little longer to draft. So what we would do is bring the elements of the regulations to TAB for consideration and getting their input on, these are good, these aren't, let's change this, and et cetera.
So, I mean, is it okay to make a comment?
Go ahead.
I mean, to me, that seems like a far healthier thing for our community to be looking at. Not only from a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, assuming that the e-bikes last longer than the e-scooters do, but from an injury rate as well. I mean, unless something is different than we think it is as far as the e-bike rental and e-bike share programs in other cities, it looks like the fatality rates and the injury rates are much, much lower than scooters. So it seems like, as far as trying to advance access to, do you consider e-bikes micromobility? Let me just ask that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Either personal or, I know it's an industry term, it's a buzzword, but yes, e-bikes, bikes, scooters are all forms of micromobility. Even one wheels and electric powered unicycles, and those are all considered, whether personal or shared, are considered forms of micromobility.
Because we're seeing a lot of personally owned electric skateboards, personally owned one wheel. I don't know if they're called hoverboards or whatever, but on the path, I see many more of those now than I have in the last 18 months. So my opinion is that that would be a better way to go to increase shared micromobility. Rental micromobility would be the e-bikes and increasing the number so that it's attractive to a company to come here rather than the e-scooters.
Bob.
So I'm with Sam. The devil's going to be the detail, and I want to hear what the numbers are. Obviously, what the numbers we picked a couple years ago were too low because no one came into town, so the economics didn't work out. So I would welcome Tab's input and then bring that back to us with some recommendations. And so I want to marry together what Sam said and what Adam and Mary said. I'm with Adam and Mary. I'm not saying that e-scooters are never going to be a solution here. Maybe someday they will. Maybe maybe people will get better at riding them. Maybe people will figure out how to use helmets and whatnot. I don't know. But I'd rather not experiment. But I would like to experiment with e-bikes. And so what I'd like to suggest is continue our pause on e-scooter rentals. I don't know if that's 6 months or 12 months, but continue that pause, because I think Adam's right. I think they're not ready for prime time yet. Maybe they will get ready for prime time, or maybe they'll never get ready for prime time. The things that are breaking are people, obviously, and we don't want to break people. But in the meantime, let's have Tab give us some recommendations and staff give us some recommendations on how we can crank it up with the e-bikes, and maybe that is our solution, and maybe we're all going to be happy, and we're not going to kill people, and we're going to have a really great micromobility. But that's something we can revisit, down the road as time goes on. I had one other thing to say, but I can't remember what it was.
So I just want to bring it back to council, and it sounds like there might be a compromise here to wait on a pilot for a while longer as these evolve and we get more data, but to start with Sam and Bob's suggestion to try and get more micromobility through the e-bikes. And is that something that we could get more support on? Because it seems like we're split right now.
I think what you have is a disagreement. So, yeah. I think it sounds like there's not majority support for an e-scooter pilot right now. So you can just say that there's not majority support. But then I think moving forward with the e-bike, updating to those regulations sounds like a great idea, and go for it.
All right, what Aaron said.
One thing you guys should be prepared of. So, we seem to be surprised by these things, and maybe you guys are already aware of this, but I know in many cities, including New York, rental mopeds are the new thing. Okay, this is the new thing that you guys are going to have to deal with and make recommendations. And these are rental mopeds. It's a one-time fee of $19, and then it's like $1 every 10 minutes. They do come with helmets. There's 2 helmets as a boot, and there's 2 helmets in them. I don't know if they're safe or dangerous. I actually drive a moped all the time. I own one myself, and I've never had a problem. But this is a thing that's coming down the road, and we're going to have to figure out whether we want to try to regulate those. But they're sweeping the country, and it's just a matter of time before they start showing up on our streets, and people are zipping around in mopeds and probably not knowing what they're doing. So just be ready for that one.
They're in Denver.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Pieces, I really appreciated the conversation tonight, and I just want to link it back up, right? So the 2 actions that we talked about tonight is everyone comfortable on how those are now wed together, right? Because we kind of had to have them independent to get to here. So is there anything that that we've done that where everyone's cool still, I guess I want to ask. Good?
Well, I mean, if we make it easier to bring dockless electric bikes into town, that may impact B-Cycle's viability.
And I'll just play devil's advocate just for one moment. I'll channel Mary being devil's advocate, right? That we do have a proposal on the table from CU. Why we were not totally crazy, we're just a little bit crazy. But the idea was if we could take our current system and not sacrifice it, which is the B-Cycle system, and invest in it with some money that we have, it's almost passing the plate. Would that be the place to try the e-bike pilot thing and get that going, right? Because you said yourself, like the e-bike place is where we want to go. So given that, right, that was our maybe if we have this money, we could try it this year, see where it goes. Get some data this year to see what it looks like when we induce those e-bikes into the fleet. We can get data from that pretty easy about their usage, who's using them. We can query that a little more. So this fall, we could come back with some informed data about e-bikes through the current program by also offering subsidy to a local provider that we kind of brokered from CU. I'll try to go back and get the 60% if that's what makes it happen. 50%, sorry, I did it wrong. Yeah, sorry. But that's how those two things come together. And I hate to retract back, but if there's some direction that we could actually try to take that extra investment that we outlined to get the e-bikes going this fall, that would be what I'm trying to bring together.
Hey, can I weigh in on
Just
that
let
too?
me go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to be supportive of more e-bikes, but I want it to be done in the context of a financial plan for B-Cycle that gives it a life beyond March of this year or August of this year. I'd like to see it be put on a better footing.
I think if we had a choice between supporting B-Cycle or supporting a commercial venture, we obviously want to support B-Cycle ahead of that. It does kind of beg the question, though, why B-Cycle would require a subsidy and yet others would come in here and spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of their own money and think that they're going to make a profit. So you do have to start running the math there and say, are those businesses crazy? Is B-Cycle run inefficiently? What's the disconnect between B-Cycle can run e-bikes, but we have to give them a lot of money, and all these other companies are clamoring to come in here and make money. So we have to kind of somehow round that out.
Yeah,
startups don't make profits.
Yeah, well,
what they do.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's as simple as that.
Yeah, the revenue model is different, right? The data piece that's embedded into that conversation is key. And Los Angeles is going through a legal conversation right now about what the prorated rate is for the data that they're actually going to decipher from those systems. So data and how it's applied to those, which B-Cycle doesn't. You saw it tonight, like we don't track all the data within B-Cycle, and the other for-profit companies are not out there for a transportation function, they're out there for a data function. When that app runs on your phone, so Amnos, right, it collects a whole bunch of information that is the proprietary part. It's proprietary, it's also the fundamental part of why they're collecting the data, and that's why B-Cycle locally is saying this is transparently, and we'll keep digging on it, how much it really costs, but that's why it's going to initially seem like it costs more.
Okay.
So let's wrap this up. Did you have one more comment to make, Sam?
Well, it was to try and wrap it up. I mean, it was basically to say that I think what our instructions were, if I understood the first part of the evening, was do what's needed to preserve B-Cycle as is, and then go to TAB and talk about the e-bike part of it and hear from TAB and bring it back to us within a few months. But this other set of changes that you're talking about also needs to go through TAB and then needs to come back to us. And so I don't think one necessarily supplants the other. They may be part of the same kind of conversation, because what B-Cycle will do, we'll have access to the data and we'll understand it, and it's part of, we'll have transparency on the costs, whereas with a private company that comes in, we won't have transparency on the data or the costs. And so they may be doing loss leader kinds of stuff. They may be doing, they may be charging more than B-Cycle would charge for the same e-bike because there's a profit requirement in there somewhere. So I think we'll only find out as we do both. So I thought our instruction was clear, which is do what's required to keep B-Cycle alive and get a tab about the e-bike portion and come back to us.
Done.
All right.
Does that sound right?
You get what you need?
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, are we adjourned?
We're adjourned.
Thanks, Mary.
Live from Paris on Spot 24.